I asked for just a 9% raise at 38. My wife's father, the CEO, burst into laughter and said, maybe it's time for early retirement. So, I did exactly what he suggested. One phone call later, his biggest rival made me an offer that tripled my salary. The CEO had no idea what was coming. If you've ever sat across from someone you thought loved you and watched their face twist into something unrecognizable, you know the exact moment I'm about to describe. It's the moment when the air changes texture, when your pulse becomes audible in your ears, when you realize that the person you've trusted has been wearing a mask so perfect, you never even thought to look for seams. I was 38 years old the day I asked for a 9% raise. 9%. Not 90, not even 19. 9. A single digit followed by a percentage sign that represented 3 years of exemplary performance reviews, 2 major accounts I'd personally saved from collapse, and 1 breakthrough strategy that had increased quarterly revenue by 32%. 9% seemed, if anything, conservative. Modest, even. The kind of number that acknowledged my worth without seeming greedy, that recognized my contribution without appearing entitled. I had practiced the conversation in my car that morning, sitting in the parking garage of Richardson and Hale Industries headquarters, watching my breath fog the windshield in the February cold. The building rose above me like a monument to corporate success. 47 stories of steel and glass that caught the winter sun and threw it back in sharp, glittering shards. I had been coming to this building for 12 years. 12 years of early mornings and late nights, of client dinners and weekend strategy sessions, of gradually climbing from junior analyst to senior director of strategic partnerships. 12 years of making someone else's legacy shine brighter. My phone had buzzed with a text from my wife, Melissa. Good luck today. Dad's in a good mood. Perfect timing. Love you. I had stared at those words for a long moment. Dad. Not Richard. Not Mr. Richardson. Just Dad, as casual as if we were all one big happy family. As if the fact that I'd married his daughter 12 years ago had somehow dissolved every professional boundary, every hierarchical line, every carefully maintained separation between personal and corporate. The meeting was scheduled for 2 o'clock. Richard Richardson, CEO, founder, and my father-in-law, kept his office on the 47th floor, a corner suite with windows that overlooked the entire city. I had been in that office hundreds of times over the years, but never for this. Never to ask for something that felt, in the asking, like an admission that I wasn't already being given everything I deserved. The elevator ride felt longer than usual. Each floor that passed made my prepared speech feel more rehearsed, more artificial. I had the numbers memorized, the Donovan account, saved it from a $15 million loss, turned it into a $22 million gain. The Chen merger facilitated negotiations that everyone else said were impossible, resulting in a partnership that had already generated $40 million in new revenue. The Westbrook crisis stepped in when our lead negotiator had a heart attack mid-deal, closed it in 72 hours, exceeded projected outcomes by 18%. 9% was nothing compared to what I delivered. The 47th floor was quiet, in the way expensive spaces always are. Sound seemed to disappear into the thick carpet, the mahogany paneling, the museum-quality art on the walls. Richard's assistant, Patricia, had worked for him for 26 years. She looked up when I approached, her smile warm but professional. "He's expecting you, James," she said, gesturing toward the door. "Go right in." I knocked twice, a habit from my first year here when I was still unsure of my place, and pushed open the door. Richard was standing at the window, hands clasped behind his back, looking out over the city like a general surveying his kingdom. He didn't turn when I entered, and I stood there for a moment, waiting, feeling suddenly like a supplicant approaching a throne. James, he said finally, his voice carrying that particular tone of bonhomie that I'd learned over the years could mean anything from genuine pleasure to calculated dismissiveness. Come in, sit down. I sat in one of the leather chairs facing his desk. Chairs that cost more than my first car. Chairs that were designed to make you feel simultaneously comfortable and aware of your position. Richard turned from the window, and I saw that he was smiling. It was the smile I'd seen at family dinners, at holiday gatherings, at my wedding. Warm, paternal, completely trustworthy. So, he said, settling into his own chair with the ease of a man who had never questioned his right to occupy any space he chose. What can I do for you? I had planned to ease into it, to start with gratitude, to acknowledge the opportunities I'd been given, to frame my request as a natural progression rather than a demand. But sitting there, looking at this man who had been at my wedding, who had held my children when they were born, who had told me more than once that I was like a son to him, something shifted. The rehearsed speech felt suddenly dishonest, like I was trying to trick him into giving me something I'd already earned. I'd like to discuss my compensation, I said, keeping my voice steady. Professional. I've been with the company for 12 years now, and I believe my performance warrants a salary adjustment. Richard's smile didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Interest, maybe? Or amusement. Of course, he said. I'm always open to these conversations. What did you have in mind? This was it. The moment I'd been preparing for. I leaned forward slightly, maintaining eye contact, keeping my tone confident but not aggressive. Based on my performance over the past 3 years, the accounts I've managed, the revenue I've generated, and current market rates for my position and experience level, I think a 9% increase is appropriate and fair. I had more to say. I had a whole presentation ready, specific examples, comparative data, industry benchmarks. But I stopped there, giving him a chance to respond, to acknowledge what we both knew to be true, that I was underpaid for what I delivered, that 9% was more than reasonable, that this was a formality more than a negotiation. Richard was quiet for a moment. He leaned back in his chair, steepled his fingers, and looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Then, he did something I wasn't expecting. He laughed. Not a polite chuckle, not a brief acknowledgement of humor. He laughed. A real, full-throated laugh that filled the office and seemed to bounce off the expensive art on the walls. He laughed like I had just told the funniest joke he'd heard all year. I sat there, frozen. As the sound washed over me, my prepared arguments vanished. My confidence evaporated. I felt, suddenly, like I was 12 years old again, being laughed at in a middle school cafeteria for reasons I didn't understand. I'm sorry, Richard said finally, wiping at his eyes. I'm sorry, James. I don't mean to be rude, but... He broke off, laughing again. 9%? At 38? He said it like I'd asked for something absurd. Like I'd walked in and demanded a corner office and a private jet. Like 9% was the most ridiculous thing he'd ever heard. Richard, I started, but he held up a hand. No, hear me out. He was still smiling, but the warmth had drained from it. It was the smile of someone who was about to deliver bad news and wanted you to know it wasn't personal. I understand where you're coming from. I do. But you have to look at this realistically. The market's changing. We're facing increased competition. Margins are tighter than they've been in years. This isn't the time to be asking for raises. This is the time to be grateful we're all still employed. Each word landed like a stone. The Donovan account, the Chen merger, the Westbrook crisis. None of it mattered. 12 years of loyalty, of sacrifice, of missing my kids' bedtimes and my anniversary dinners, and my father's funeral because the company needed me. None of it was enough to warrant 9%. I've generated over 80 million in revenue for this company in the last 3 years alone, I said quietly. The numbers felt like weapons now, sharp and precise. 9% of my current salary is... I know what it is, Richard interrupted, and now the smile was completely gone. And I'm telling you, it's not happening. Not now. Maybe not ever. He leaned forward, his elbows on the desk, his expression shifting into something that looked almost like concern. Almost. James, you're at a point in your career where you need to start thinking strategically. You've had a good run here. You've done well, but the reality is the company needs to start developing younger talent. People who can take us into the next decade. Maybe... He paused as if the idea was just occurring to him. Maybe it's time to think about early retirement. The words hung in the air between us like smoke. Early retirement. I was 38 years old. I had 2 children in private school, a mortgage, aging parents who would need care soon. I was in the prime of my career, at the peak of my abilities, generating more value than I ever had. And my father-in-law, the man who had given a speech at my wedding about how proud he was to have me in the family, was suggesting I retire. You're serious, I said. It wasn't a question. I'm being practical, Richard replied. Look, we both know how this works. You've done your time. You've made your contributions. But continuing to push for more money, more recognition, it doesn't look good, James. It looks entitled. It looks like you're not a team player. He sat back, spreading his hands in a gesture that was probably meant to seem magnanimous. Take some time. Think about what you really want. Maybe a transition to an advisory role. Something part-time. You could spend more time with Melissa and the kids. Wouldn't that be nice? I stared at him. Really stared at him. And, for the first time in 12 years, I saw him clearly. Not as my father-in-law, not as my mentor, not as the man who had welcomed me into his family with open arms. I saw him as he actually was, a man who had extracted every ounce of value from my labor and was now discarding me the moment I asked for a fraction of what I was worth. Think about it, Richard said, standing up in a clear dismissal. Take the weekend. We'll talk again Monday. But James... He paused at the door to the conference room attached to his office, his hand on the frame. Manage your expectations. We all have to make sacrifices. I left his office in a daze. The elevator ride down felt like a descent into cold water, each floor making it harder to breathe. I walked through the parking garage without seeing it, got into my car, sat there with my hands on the wheel and my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. My phone buzzed. Another text from Melissa. How'd it go? Did he say yes? I stared at the question marks. 3 of them, like she couldn't contain her excitement. Like she believed, truly believed, that her father would recognize my worth and reward it accordingly. I didn't respond. Instead, I sat there as the February sun set behind the Richardson and Hale building, as the shadows lengthened and the temperature dropped and my breath fogged the windshield again. I sat there and thought about 12 years of my life. 12 years of building someone else's empire. 12 years of being told I was family while being treated like an employee. 12 years of watching Richardson take credit for strategies I designed, accounts I saved, victories I earned. Early retirement. The words echoed in my mind, and something inside me, something that had been bending for years under the weight of gratitude and loyalty and family obligation, finally snapped. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found a name I hadn't looked at in 3 years. Marcus Webb. Marcus had tried to recruit me 5 years ago, when I was still naive enough to think loyalty mattered. He ran Meridian Strategic Group, Richardson and Hale's biggest competitor, and he'd offered me nearly double my salary to jump ship. I turned him down because I was married to Melissa, because Richard was family, because you don't betray the people who gave you a chance. I stared at Marcus's name for a long moment, my thumb hovering over the call button. Then I thought about Richard's laugh, his smile, his casual suggestion that I disappear into early retirement at 38, conveniently clearing the way for whatever young, cheap talent he'd rather develop. I pressed call. Marcus answered on the second ring. "James fucking Carter," he said, and I could hear the grin in his voice. "I never thought I'd see your name on my caller ID again. Tell me you're finally ready to have a real conversation." I looked up at the Richardson and Hale building, at the lights blazing in windows on every floor, at the company logo etched in steel above the main entrance. "I'm ready," I said. And just like that, everything changed. The thing about betrayal is that it doesn't announce itself with trumpets and fanfare. It arrives quietly, in a laugh that lasts 3 seconds too long, in a suggestion wrapped in concern, in the moment you realize that the person across from you has been calculating your value in dollars and cents while you were calculating it in years and loyalty. I sat in my car with Marcus Webb's voice in my ear, and the parking garage around me felt like a tomb. Cold concrete, harsh fluorescent lighting, the distant echo of car doors closing on other floors. Through the windshield, I could see the Richardson and Hale building lit up against the darkening sky, every window a small rectangle of amber light, every light representing someone still working, still grinding, still believing that their effort mattered to the people on the 47th floor. "James," Marcus said when I didn't immediately respond. "You still there?" "I'm here," I managed. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Flat, distant, like it was coming from somewhere outside my body. "Good. Because I've been waiting 5 years for this call, and I'll be damned if you're going to back out now." There was no hostility in his tone, just a kind of amused certainty, like he'd always known this moment would arrive eventually. "So let me ask you straight. Are you actually ready to talk? Or is this just a bad day at the office?" It was a fair question. Marcus Webb hadn't built Meridian Strategic Group into a billion-dollar competitor by wasting time on maybes and almosts. He dealt in certainties, in commitments, in people who knew their own worth and weren't afraid to claim it. "Richard suggested I consider early retirement," I said. The words tasted bitter. "I'm 38. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then Marcus laughed, but it wasn't the mocking laugh Richard had given me. This was the laugh of someone who had seen this play out 100 times before, who recognized the pattern and found it predictable in its cruelty. "Let me guess," Marcus said. "You asked for a raise, something reasonable, maybe 10%? And he looked at you like you'd just asked for his kidney." 9%, I said quietly. 9, Marcus let the number hang there. "And what have you done for him lately?" Ballpark. I could have given him the sanitized version, the professional summary. But something about sitting in that cold garage, with Richard's laugh still echoing in my memory, made me want to speak the truth plainly. Brutally, even. The Donovan account was going to cost the company $15 million in penalties and lost revenue. I restructured the entire contract, rebuilt the relationship from scratch, and turned it into a $22 million profit. The Chen merger was dead in the water. Our lead negotiator couldn't close it. I stepped in, facilitated terms that everyone said were impossible, and that partnership has generated over $40 million in new revenue. 3 months ago, when Sterling had his heart attack in the middle of the Westbrook negotiation, I closed that deal in 72 hours and exceeded our projections by 18%. I took a breath. Over the last 3 years, I've personally generated or saved more than $80 million for Richardson and Hale. The silence on the other end felt different now, heavier, more attentive. And he laughed at you, Marcus said slowly, for asking for 9%. He laughed at me, I confirmed. Then he suggested early retirement might be a good option, said the company needs to develop younger talent. Jesus Christ. Marcus's voice had gone cold. James, I'm going to say something, and I need you to really hear it. Are you listening? I'm listening. Richard Richardson is doing what every comfortable executive does when they found someone who's too loyal to leave and too valuable to properly compensate. He's exploiting you. He's been exploiting you for years, and the only reason he got away with it is because you married his daughter and convinced yourself that made you family. Marcus paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was softer but no less intense. But you're not family to him, James. You're an asset, and the moment an asset starts asking for its actual value, it becomes a liability. I closed my eyes. The words landed like physical blows because they were true. Undeniably, painfully true. How many times had I worked late because family helps family? How many opportunities had I turned down because we take care of our own? How many times had I swallowed my frustration and told myself that loyalty mattered more than money, that being part of the Richardson family was worth more than market value? So here's what I'm offering, Marcus continued, his tone shifting into something sharper, more businesslike. Same position I offered you 5 years ago, adjusted for inflation and your expanded resume. Senior Vice President of Strategic Partnerships. Base salary of $420,000. That's roughly triple what Richardson's paying you now, if I had to guess. Performance bonuses tied to account value, with a floor of $100,000 and no ceiling. Full benefits, including a vehicle allowance and equity options. And, James, this is important, you'd be reporting directly to me, not some middle manager who's trying to justify their own existence. $420,000. I did the math automatically. My current salary was $142,000. After 12 years with the company. 9% would have brought it to $154,780. A pittance compared to what Marcus was offering. A rounding error. I know what you're thinking, Marcus said, reading my silence correctly. You're thinking about Melissa, about your kids, about Thanksgiving dinners and family photos, and the fact that Richardson's your father-in-law. He was right. That was exactly what I was thinking. Because this wasn't just about leaving a job. This was about detonating a family. About sitting across from my wife and telling her that her father had treated me like a disposable asset, that I was jumping to his biggest competitor, that everything she believed about her family and my place in it was built on a foundation that had just cracked straight down the middle. I know it's complicated, Marcus said, his voice gentler now. But James, ask yourself this. If the situation were reversed, if you had treated Richardson the way he just treated you, would he hesitate for even a second to do what's best for himself? The answer came immediately, unbidden, undeniable. No. Richard Richardson hadn't built his empire by prioritizing other people's feelings over his own interests. He hadn't climbed to the top by letting loyalty or family ties interfere with smart business decisions. He was a man who calculated value and acted accordingly, and, right now, he had calculated that I was more expensive than I was worth. When would you need an answer? I asked. Yesterday, Marcus said with a short laugh. But realistically, I know you need to think this through. Talk to your wife, if that's what you need to do. But James, and I mean this with all sincerity, don't wait too long. Richardson's already told you he's thinking about pushing you out. You really want to wait around to see what that looks like? I looked up at the building again. 47 stories of steel and glass, built on the labor of people who believed that hard work and loyalty would be rewarded. How many of them were like me? How many were being systematically underpaid, overworked, and gaslit into thinking they should be grateful for the opportunity? I need 48 hours, I said. The words felt both impulsive and inevitable, like I was simultaneously jumping off a cliff and landing exactly where I was always meant to be. You've got them, Marcus replied immediately. But James, do me a favor. Before you make your final decision, pull your employment contract. Read it carefully. Check your non-compete clauses, your confidentiality agreements, all of it. I'm going to assume Richardson's had you sign a lot of paperwork over the years, and I want you to know exactly what you're dealing with before we move forward. It was smart advice. Practical. The kind of thing I should have thought of myself but hadn't, because my brain was still trying to process the last 2 hours of my life. I will, I said. Good man. I'll be waiting for your call. Marcus paused, and I could hear something shift in his tone. Less business, more personal. For what it's worth, James, I've been watching your career for a long time. The work you do is exceptional. Richardson's a fool for not seeing it, and Meridian would be lucky to have you. Whatever you decide, I hope you choose the option that values you the way you deserve to be valued. He hung up before I could respond, leaving me alone in my car with the echo of his words and the weight of the decision pressing down on my chest like a physical thing. $420,000. Triple my current salary. For doing the same work I was already doing, except for someone who actually appreciated it. I started the car and pulled out of the parking garage, the familiar route home unfolding automatically while my mind spun in circles. The city passed by in a blur of streetlights and traffic signals, the February cold seeping through the windows despite the heater running at full blast. I passed the coffee shop where Melissa and I had our first date 13 years ago, the park where I'd proposed, the hospital where both our children were born. Every landmark felt like evidence in a trial I hadn't realized I was attending. Evidence of a life built on the assumption that family and business could coexist peacefully, that loyalty would be reciprocated, that doing the right thing would eventually be rewarded. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. Another text from Melissa. James? Everything okay? Starting to worry. I pulled over into a grocery store parking lot, my hands shaking slightly as I picked up the phone. The screen glowed in the gathering darkness, her message sitting there with 2 more question marks than necessary, and I realized that this was the first decision point of many. Tell her now? Wait? Pretend everything was fine until I'd made up my mind? I typed, all good, meeting ran long, be home soon. The lie felt necessary and terrible in equal measure. But the truth, the real truth, wasn't something I could deliver via text message. It wasn't something I could explain in a phone call or a quick conversation in the driveway. It would require time, space, and a level of honesty that would fundamentally alter our relationship. Because if I told Melissa what her father had said, what he'd done, I wouldn't just be sharing information. I would be asking her to choose. Her father or her husband. Family loyalty or justice. The comfortable fiction we'd been living, or the uncomfortable truth that had just revealed itself. I pulled back onto the road and continued home, my mind running calculations that had nothing to do with money. Melissa would be hurt. The kids would be confused. Richard would be furious. His wife, Eleanor, would blame me for causing family drama. The entire Richardson clan, 3 siblings, their spouses, 7 cousins, countless aunts and uncles, would close ranks the way families do when an outsider threatens the internal hierarchy. But I wasn't an outsider, was I? I'd been told I was family. Welcomed at every holiday, every birthday, every graduation and christening and funeral. I'd been brought into the fold and told I belonged, that my success was their success, that we were all in this together, until I asked for 9%. Until I dared to suggest that my value should be reflected in my compensation. Until I stopped being grateful and started being honest. Our house appeared at the end of the street, a 4-bedroom colonial in a good school district, purchased with a down payment gift from Richard and Eleanor that I'd never been allowed to forget. The lights were on in every window, warm and inviting, and I could see Melissa's silhouette moving past the kitchen window, probably making dinner, probably wondering why I was late, probably excited to hear about the raise she assumed I'd gotten. I sat in the driveway for a long moment, the engine still running, the heater still blasting. Through the front window, I could see my daughter, Emma, walking past with a book in her hands. She was 9 years old, brilliant and funny, and convinced that her grandfather hung the moon. My son, Tyler, was probably in his room doing homework or playing video games, equally convinced that the world was stable and predictable, and that the adults in his life had everything figured out. What would they think when they learned that their father had jumped to their grandfather's biggest competitor? That I'd betrayed the family, as Richard would undoubtedly frame it? Would they understand that I'd been pushed, that loyalty is supposed to be a two-way street, that you can't ask someone to sacrifice everything and offer nothing in return? I turned off the car and sat in the sudden silence, my breath fogging the windshield one more time. 48 hours, Marcus had said. 48 hours to decide whether to stay in a situation where I was systematically devalued, or to leap into an opportunity that would transform my family's financial future, but potentially destroy its emotional foundation. The front door opened, and Melissa appeared, backlit by the warm glow of our house, her hand raised in a wave. I waved back and gathered my briefcase. 48 hours. The countdown had already begun. If you've ever tried to eat dinner while your entire world is quietly disintegrating, you understand the particular kind of hell I experienced that evening. Every bite of food tasted like cardboard. Every smile felt like a mask that was slowly slipping. Every normal question from my children, "How was work, Dad? Can you help me with my math homework? Are we still going skiing next month?" landed like a small knife between my ribs. Melissa had made pot roast, which she only did when she was celebrating something. The good china was out. She'd opened a bottle of wine that we'd been saving. The table was set with care, with candles even, and the entire scene looked like something from a magazine, spread about successful families who have their lives together. "So," Melissa said as she served Emma a second helping of mashed potatoes, her eyes bright with anticipation, "are you going to tell us, or are you going to make us guess?" I looked at her across the table, my wife of 12 years, the woman I'd fallen in love with before I ever knew her father owned a company. Before business and family became so entangled, I couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. She was beautiful in the candlelight, her dark hair pulled back, her smile warm and genuine, completely unaware that the celebration she'd planned was for something that hadn't happened. "Tell you what," Tyler asked, looking up from his plate with the vague interest of a 13-year-old who was mostly focused on his phone hidden under the table. "Your father asked for a raise today," Melissa announced proudly, like she was sharing news of a promotion or an award. "And I'm sure Grandpa said yes, because honestly, it's about time they recognized everything you do." Emma clapped her hands together. "Does that mean we can get a pool?" "We're not getting a pool, sweetheart," I said automatically, and my voice sounded hollow even to my own ears. Melissa's smile faltered slightly. She tilted her head, studying me with the attention of someone who'd known me long enough to read the small signs. The tension in my jaw, the way I was pushing food around my plate instead of eating it, the fact that I'd barely said 10 words since walking through the door. James, she said softly. What happened? This was the moment. I could tell her the truth right now, in front of the kids, and let the whole thing explode in real time. Or I could lie, defer, buy myself more time to figure out exactly how to frame what her father had done without turning it into a choice between her family of origin and her family of creation. Long day, I said, which was true but incomplete. Can we talk about it after dinner? Something shifted in Melissa's expression. Not quite worry, but definitely concern. She knew me well enough to know that after dinner meant not in front of the children, which meant something significant had happened. But she was also gracious enough, or perhaps uncertain enough, to let it go for now. Of course, she said, forcing brightness back into her voice. Emma, tell Dad about the science project you're working on. The rest of dinner passed in a blur of forced normalcy. Emma talked about volcanoes and chemical reactions. Tyler complained about his English teacher. Melissa mentioned that her mother had called to ask about spring break plans. I nodded and made appropriate sounds and felt like an actor in a play I hadn't auditioned for, reading lines that no longer made sense. After the kids went upstairs to do homework, I helped Melissa clear the table in silence. The ritual was familiar. I rinsed, she loaded the dishwasher, and for a few minutes, we existed in that comfortable rhythm that comes from years of shared domesticity. But I could feel her questions building, could sense her preparing to ask what she already suspected wasn't a simple answer. So, she said finally, closing the dishwasher and turning to face me. He said no. It wasn't a question. Worse, I said quietly. He laughed. Melissa's face went very still. He what? I leaned against the counter, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had carried me through the afternoon was draining away, leaving behind a bone-deep weariness that made it hard to stand upright. I asked for a 9% raise, 9% Mel. After 12 years with the company, after the Donovan account and the Chen merger and everything else I've done for him. And he laughed at me like I'd told a joke. The words came faster now, building momentum. Then he suggested I consider early retirement, said the company needs to focus on developing younger talent. Told me I should be grateful to still be employed. I watched the emotions flicker across her face. Confusion, disbelief, anger, and something else I couldn't quite identify. Hurt, maybe? Or embarrassment. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. That doesn't make sense, she said finally. My father wouldn't. He knows how hard you work. He's always saying how valuable you are to the company. Apparently valuable enough to exploit, I said, and the bitterness in my voice was sharp enough to make her flinch, but not valuable enough to fairly compensate. Melissa crossed her arms, a defensive posture I recognized from 1,000 arguments over the years. There has to be more to it. Maybe the company's facing financial issues you don't know about. Maybe. The company's revenue increased by 38% last year, I interrupted. I've seen the quarterly reports. I helped generate half of that growth personally. This isn't about money, Mel. This is about the fact that your father knows I'll work for less because I'm family. Because I won't leave. Because where else am I going to go? The question hung between us, and I saw the moment when Melissa realized that it wasn't rhetorical. That I was, in fact, asking myself exactly that question and coming up with answers she wasn't going to like. James, she said slowly, carefully. What are you thinking? This was it, the moment of truth. I could tell her about Marcus Webb's call, about the offer that was sitting in my future like a loaded gun. Or I could retreat, give myself more time, avoid the confrontation that was building like a storm front. But I was tired of avoiding, tired of being diplomatic, tired of protecting everyone's feelings except my own. I got a call this afternoon, I said. From Marcus Webb at Meridian Strategic Group. Melissa's eyes widened. Dad's competitor. His biggest competitor, I confirmed. Marcus offered me a position 5 years ago. I turned it down because I thought loyalty mattered. Because I thought being part of this family meant something more than just showing up to Christmas dinner. It does mean something, Melissa said, but her voice had gone thin, uncertain. Does it? I pushed off from the counter, started pacing the kitchen because standing still felt impossible. Because from where I'm standing, Mel, it looks like I've spent 12 years being systematically underpaid and overworked while being told I should be grateful for the privilege. And the moment I asked for a fraction of what I'm worth, your father laughed in my face and suggested I disappear. So what? Melissa's voice rose slightly. You're going to jump to Meridian? You're going to work for the man my father considers his biggest professional rival? Do you have any idea what that would do to this family? What about what your father did to me? The words came out louder than I intended. What about the 12 years I've given him? What about the fact that I've sacrificed time with my own kids to build his empire? What about my worth, Melissa? Or does that not matter as much as keeping your father happy? She stared at me, and I watched tears begin to form in her eyes. That's not fair. No, I agreed quietly. It's not. None of this is fair. The silence that followed was heavy and terrible. We stood on opposite sides of the kitchen, physically only a few feet apart, but the distance felt much greater. This was the chasm I'd feared, the impossible choice I'd known would come the moment I picked up the phone and called Marcus Webb. I need to think, I said finally. Marcus gave me 48 hours to decide, but he also suggested I review my employment contract before making any moves. So that's what I'm going to do tonight. Melissa wiped at her eyes. And then what? You're just going to leave? Jump ship to my father's competitor and blow up everything we've built here? What have we built, Mel? I asked, and I was genuinely curious. A life where I'm perpetually undervalued? A relationship where I can't advocate for my own worth without it being seen as a betrayal? A family where I'm only welcomed as long as I don't cost too much? That is not what this is, she said. But even she didn't sound entirely convinced. I moved toward the stairs. I'm going to the office to pull my contract. We can talk more tomorrow, after we've both had time to process this. James, I stopped but didn't turn around. I love you, she said softly. Whatever happens, I need you to know that. I love you too, I replied. And I meant it, but I also knew that love, by itself, wasn't enough to fix what was broken. Not this time. The office was in the converted attic, a space I'd claimed years ago when Tyler was born and I needed somewhere quiet to work from home. I climbed the stairs slowly, each step feeling like a small surrender, and closed the door behind me. The room was exactly as I'd left it that morning. Laptop open on the desk, cold coffee in a mug, a stack of client files waiting for review. The normalcy of it felt surreal after the chaos of the day. This morning, I'd been a man who believed he knew his place in the world. Now, I was someone else entirely. Someone who understood that his place had always been conditional, subject to change, built on foundations that could crumble with a single laugh and a few careless words. I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop, navigating to the secure folder where I kept copies of all my employment documents. The contract was there, dated 12 years ago. My signature at the bottom next to Richard Richardson's flowing script. Looking at it now, I felt a strange mixture of nostalgia and nausea. I'd been so excited that day, 26 years old, fresh off an MBA, convinced I'd just landed the opportunity of a lifetime. I'd signed everything they put in front of me without reading the fine print, without questioning the terms, without understanding that every clause was designed to protect them and constrain me. Now I read it carefully, methodically, with the attention of someone who finally understood that the words on this page had been quietly shaping my life for over a decade. The non-compete clause was brutal. I was prohibited from working for any direct competitor in the strategic consulting or partnership facilitation space for a period of 2 years following my departure. The definition of direct competitor was vague enough to encompass virtually any company in our industry. The confidentiality agreement was equally comprehensive. I couldn't share any proprietary information, client lists, strategic methodologies, or internal processes with any third party. The definition of proprietary was so broad it could arguably include everything I'd learned about the business. There was a clause about client ownership that specified any relationships I'd developed while employed by Richardson and Hale remained company property, not personal connections I could leverage elsewhere. Another clause about competitive solicitation that prevented me from recruiting any current employees to join me at a new company. And, buried in Section 14, subsection C, a penalty clause. If I violated any terms of the agreement, I would be liable for liquidated damages equal to 3 times my annual salary, plus legal fees and costs associated with enforcement. I sat back in my chair, the implications washing over me like cold water. This wasn't just an employment contract. It was a cage. A carefully constructed set of restrictions designed to ensure that anyone who left Richardson and Hale would be hobbled professionally, unable to leverage their experience or relationships or knowledge without risking financial ruin. Had I known this when I signed it? Probably. Had I understood it? Not even close. I'd been too young, too eager, too convinced that I'd never want to leave to worry about the terms of departure. My phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. This is Marcus. Not trying to pressure you, but my lawyers are standing by if you need help reviewing your paperwork. They've handled these situations before. Let me know. I stared at the message, at this lifeline being offered by someone who had every incentive to help me, but no obligation to care about the personal consequences. Marcus Webb was a businessman. He saw value in me and wanted to acquire it. But he was also being more considerate of my position, more respectful of my worth than the man who had been my father-in-law for 12 years. I typed back, "Would appreciate that. How quickly can they review?" The response came within seconds. "Send it now. They'll have preliminary analysis by morning." I attached my contract and hit send before I could second-guess the decision. There was something transgressive about it. Sharing my employment agreement with my would-be future employer felt like crossing a line, like making a choice before I'd officially made a choice. But maybe that was the point. Maybe I had already made the choice in that parking garage when I called Marcus Webb. Everything since then had just been the slow, painful process of acknowledging what I decided in that moment of clarity. Another text from Marcus. "One more thing. Before you make your final decision, I want you to know something. I've been in this business for 25 years. I've seen a lot of talented people stuck in situations like yours. Undervalued, overworked, trapped by loyalty or family ties or fear of change. The ones who stay always regret it. The ones who leave never do. Think about that." I read the message 3 times, then set my phone down and looked around my office. At the degrees on the wall, the awards from various professional organizations, the framed photo of my team from last year's company retreat. Evidence of a career built within Richardson and Hale's walls. But what did I have to show for it? Besides the house with the mortgage we'd never paid off, the good school district we could barely afford, The retirement account that was respectable, but nowhere near where it should be after 12 years of high-level work. I opened a new browser tab and searched for Marcus Webb's name. Articles appeared, profiles in business magazines, interviews about Meridian's success, analysis of how he'd built a company that rivaled Richardson and Hale in just 15 years. In every photo, he looked confident but not arrogant, successful but not flashy, like someone who understood that business was business, that value should be rewarded, that talent deserved respect. Like the kind of person I wished I'd been working for all along. Downstairs, I heard Melissa moving through the house, the familiar sounds of her evening routine, checking that the kids had done their homework, starting laundry, preparing for tomorrow, living the life we'd built together, unaware that I was sitting in the attic, systematically dismantling every assumption that life was built on. My laptop pinged with an email notification. Marcus's legal team, already sending preliminary thoughts. Initial review suggests contract is enforceable, but has several exploitable ambiguities. Full analysis by 8 a.m. Recommend not discussing with current employer until we've identified optimal exit strategy. Optimal exit strategy. The phrase made it sound clinical, professional, like I was planning a corporate restructuring instead of potentially destroying my marriage and alienating my children from their grandfather. But maybe that was exactly what I needed. Clinical detachment, professional clarity, the ability to see the situation for what it was instead of what I wanted it to be. I closed my laptop and sat in the darkness of my office, listening to the house settle around me, feeling the weight of the next 36 hours pressing down like an avalanche waiting to fall. Somewhere below, Melissa was probably wondering if I was ever coming to bed, wondering if our marriage could survive this, wondering whose side she would have to choose. And I was wondering the same thing. Sleep, when it finally came, was fractured and restless. I dreamed of contracts written in disappearing ink, of falling through floors that looked solid but weren't, of standing in front of Richard's desk while he laughed and the sound echoed until it filled the entire building, every floor, every office, until there was nothing left but that mocking laughter and my own silence. I woke at 5:47 a.m. to find Melissa's side of the bed empty and cold. She'd either risen early or never come to bed at all. I'd fallen asleep in my office around 2 a.m. and stumbled to the bedroom sometime after that, too exhausted to register whether she was there or not. The house was quiet in that particular way that precedes dawn, when darkness is just beginning to soften at the edges, but the sun hasn't yet committed to the day. I lay there for a moment, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of yesterday settle back onto my chest like a physical thing. For a few seconds, maybe less, I existed in that strange twilight state where you're not quite sure if the previous day's events were real or imagined. Then, memory crashed back in with perfect, brutal clarity. Richard's laugh, Marcus's offer, Melissa's tears, the contract with its cage-like clauses. I reached for my phone on the nightstand. 5:47 a.m. meant Marcus's legal team would have sent their full analysis. They'd promised it by 8. But people like that didn't sleep much, didn't believe in traditional business hours when there was an advantage to be gained. Sure enough, there were 3 emails waiting. The first was from someone named Jennifer Castellano, senior partner at Meridian's outside counsel. The subject line read, "Contract analysis, time sensitive." I opened it with fingers that felt clumsy, still heavy with interrupted sleep. "Mr. Carter, please find attached our comprehensive analysis of your Richardson and Hale employment agreement. Summary of key findings. Non-compete clause, Section 7, is enforceable but overly broad. In our jurisdiction, courts typically limit such restrictions to 12 to 18 months for senior positions, not 24 months as specified. Additionally, The definition of direct competitor could be challenged as unreasonably expansive. 2. Client ownership clause. Section 11 is problematic. While R&H can claim proprietary rights to client relationships developed using company resources, they cannot prevent you from accepting business from clients who independently seek you out. This distinction is critical. 3. Liquidated damages clause, Section 14C, is likely unenforceable. The amount specified, 3x annual salary, bears no reasonable relationship to actual damages and would probably be deemed punitive rather than compensatory by most courts. 4. Critical finding. Your contract contains a severability clause, Section 19, stating that if any provision is found unenforceable, the remaining provisions stay in effect. This works in your favor. We can challenge the most restrictive clauses without invalidating the entire agreement. Our recommendation? Proceed with your career transition. If R&H attempts enforcement, we are prepared to defend aggressively and believe we have an 85% likelihood of prevailing on most contested points. However, expect litigation. Richard Richardson does not strike us as someone who accepts defection gracefully. We are available for a call at your convenience to discuss strategy. Best regards, Jennifer Castellano. Escrit. I read the email twice, then a third time, parsing the legal language into practical reality. What it meant, stripped of professional courtesy, was this. Yes, the contract was designed to trap me. No, the trap wasn't as strong as it appeared. Yes, I could leave. No, it wouldn't be easy or clean or without consequences. The second email was from Marcus himself, sent at 6:02 a.m. James, by now you've seen Jennifer's analysis. I want to add something she won't say because she's a lawyer and bound by professional caution. Richardson will absolutely come after you if you join Meridian. Not because he has a strong legal case, but because he can't afford to let someone at your level jump to a competitor without trying to make an example of you. It will be expensive, stressful, and ugly. I'm telling you this not to scare you off, but because you deserve to know exactly what you're walking into. If you accept our offer, Meridian will cover all legal fees associated with any action R&H takes. We will provide you with the best representation money can buy, and we will not back down. The question you need to ask yourself isn't whether you can win this fight. You can. The question is whether you're willing to fight at all. Call me when you're ready to talk. Marcus. I set the phone down and stared at the ceiling again, watching the slowly growing light paint shadows across the plaster. Whether you're willing to fight at all. That was the real question, wasn't it? Not about contracts or legal strategy or salary negotiations. About whether I was prepared to burn bridges, to endure Richard's wrath, to watch my father-in-law transform from family member to adversary. About whether I was willing to choose myself over keeping the peace. Downstairs, I heard movement. The coffee maker grinding beans, the soft shuffle of feet on hardwood. Melissa was up. Of course she was. Neither of us were good at sleeping through crisis. I pulled on sweatpants and a t-shirt and made my way downstairs, each step feeling like a descent into a confrontation I wasn't ready for, but couldn't avoid. The kitchen was bathed in pre-dawn gray light, and Melissa stood at the counter with her back to me, watching the coffee drip with an intensity that suggested she wasn't really seeing it at all. Couldn't sleep? I said quietly, not wanting to startle her. She turned, and I saw that she'd been crying, not recently, but enough during the night that her eyes were still puffy, her face pale with exhaustion. She was wearing one of my old college sweatshirts, the one she always reached for when she needed comfort, and something about that small detail made my chest ache. I kept thinking about what you said, she replied, her voice hoarse. About being undervalued. About my father laughing at you. About Marcus Webb's offer. She wrapped her arms around herself despite the warmth of the kitchen. I hate that I didn't know, that you've been feeling this way and I didn't see it. I moved closer but stopped short of touching her, uncertain if physical comfort would be welcome or would make things worse. I didn't want you to see it. I kept telling myself it was fine, that loyalty mattered more than money, that being part of your family was worth the sacrifice. But it's not, she said softly. Not a question. I don't know anymore, I admitted. All I know is that I can't keep doing this. I can't keep working for someone who sees me as disposable while expecting me to be grateful for the opportunity to be exploited. Melissa poured 2 cups of coffee, handed me one, and leaned against the counter. We stood there in the gray light, drinking in silence. And I was reminded of early mornings when we were first married, when we'd wake before the world and share these quiet moments before the day's demands pulled us in different directions. When things were simpler. When I didn't have to choose between my career and my marriage. I talked to my mother last night, Melissa said finally, after you went up to the office. I felt my stomach drop. You told her? I told her you'd asked Dad for a raise and he'd turned you down. I didn't tell her about Marcus Webb. She looked at me over the rim of her coffee cup. Do you want to know what she said? I wasn't sure I did, but I nodded anyway. She said, your father knows what he's doing. If James deserved a raise, he'd have gotten one. Melissa's voice was flat, emotionless, like she was reporting facts about strangers. Then she told me I should remind you that family takes care of family, and that sometimes that means accepting less than we think we deserve because we're all in this together. The words landed like stones. Not surprising exactly. Eleanor Richardson had always been her husband's fiercest defender, the kind of woman who saw any criticism of her husband as a personal attack. But hearing it secondhand, through Melissa, made it somehow worse. Made it clear that this wasn't just Richard's position, but the family's position. The party line. And what do you think? I asked quietly. Melissa was quiet for a long time, staring into her coffee like it held answers. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I think my father was wrong to laugh at you. I think he should have recognized everything you've done and compensated you fairly. I think... She paused, swallowed hard. I think maybe I've been looking the other way for a long time because it was easier than admitting my father isn't the person I wanted him to be. Something in my chest loosened slightly. Not relief, exactly, but a small measure of hope that maybe we could navigate this together instead of on opposite sides. But James, she continued, and now her voice was stronger, more certain. If you take Marcus Webb's offer, if you go work for Meridian, my father will never forgive you. And I don't know if I can... She stopped, closed her eyes. I don't know if I can handle being caught in the middle of that. Family dinners will be impossible. Holidays will be a nightmare. The kids will have to choose between seeing their grandfather and supporting their father. Everything will change. Everything has already changed, I said gently. Yesterday, when your father suggested I retire at 38. When he made it clear that 12 years of loyalty meant nothing compared to the bottom line. That changed everything, Mel. I'm just deciding whether to accept it or fight it. Fighting it means fighting him, she said. Fighting my family. No, I corrected. It means choosing myself. There's a difference. She looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something shift in her expression. Not quite acceptance, but maybe understanding. Maybe the beginning of it. What did the lawyer say? She asked. About your contract? I pulled out my phone and showed her Jennifer Castellano's email. watched her read it twice, her lips moving slightly as she parsed the legal language. When she finished, she handed the phone back and let out a long, shaky breath. 85% chance of winning, but guaranteed litigation. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. My father suing my husband. That's what this comes down to. Maybe not, I said, though I didn't believe it. Maybe once he sees I'm serious, that I have good legal counsel, that I'm not going to back down, he'll what? Apologize? Offer you the raise retroactively? James, you don't know him the way I do. When someone challenges him, he doesn't back down. He escalates. He wins. That's who he is. She was right, of course. I'd seen Richard Richardson operate in business for 12 years. I'd watched him destroy competitors, eviscerate negotiations, turn situations to his advantage through sheer force of will and refusal to compromise. I'd admired it, even, when it wasn't directed at me. So what do you want me to do? I asked. Stay? Keep working for less than I'm worth? Pretend none of this happened? I don't know, she said. And now there were tears again, sliding down her cheeks in the growing light. I don't know, James. I just know that whatever you decide, everything changes. If you stay, you'll resent me and my family forever. If you go, we'll be at war with them. There's no good option here. I set down my coffee and moved to her, pulled her into my arms. She resisted for a moment, then collapsed against me, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. I held her and felt my own eyes burning, felt the weight of the impossible choice crushing both of us. I need you to understand something, I said into her hair. I love you. I love our kids. I love the life we've built. But I can't keep sacrificing my worth to maintain peace with people who don't value me. I can't teach our children that loyalty means accepting mistreatment. I can't, my voice cracked. I can't keep being the person your father thinks I should be instead of the person I actually am. Melissa pulled back slightly, looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. Who are you, James? Right now, in this moment, who are you? It was a fair question. 24 hours ago, I could have answered easily. Devoted husband, dedicated father, loyal employee, grateful son-in-law. Now, I wasn't sure about any of those identities except the first two. I'm someone who's tired of being invisible, I said slowly, working it out as I spoke. Someone who's realized that loyalty without reciprocity is just exploitation with better PR. Someone who wants his kids to see him stand up for himself instead of always backing down to keep the peace. Even if standing up means tearing this family apart, she asked. Your father tore it apart, I said quietly but firmly. The moment he laughed at me for asking for what I'd earned. The moment he suggested I disappear rather than acknowledge my value. I'm just refusing to pretend it didn't happen. Melissa stepped back, wrapped her arms around herself again. I need time, she said. I need to think about all of this, about what it means for us, for the kids, about whether I can... She stopped, shook her head. Just give me today. Don't make any decisions today. I have until tomorrow morning, I told her. Marcus needs an answer by then. Tomorrow morning, she repeated, and it sounded like a death sentence. Okay, tomorrow morning, we'll figure this out together. But today, can we just be normal? For the kids? Normal. As if normal still existed. As if we could put on masks and pretend everything was fine when the foundation of our entire life was cracking beneath our feet. But I understood what she was asking for. One more day of the illusion. One more day before we had to face the reality of what came next. Okay, I agreed. Today, we're normal. She nodded, wiped her eyes, and turned back to the coffee maker. I should get breakfast started. The kids will be up soon. I watched her move through the familiar routine, pulling out eggs, bread, the skillet we'd gotten as a wedding present. Every movement practiced, automatic, normal. And I stood there in the gray morning light, my phone heavy in my pocket with Marcus Webb's offer and Jennifer Castellanos' legal analysis, and wondered how many other families were having this exact conversation somewhere else in the world. How many other people were standing in their kitchens, watching their lives divide into before and after, wondering if the courage to change was worth the cost of the chaos it would bring. Upstairs, I heard footsteps. Tyler, probably, always the first one up. In a few minutes, he'd come downstairs looking for breakfast. Emma would follow shortly after, and we'd all sit at the table and pretend this was just another Friday morning. Just another normal day in a normal life. But my phone would still be in my pocket. The countdown clock would still be ticking, and by tomorrow morning, I would have to decide whether to be the person who stayed or the person who left. Whether to choose peace or justice. Whether to remain invisible or finally be seen. The coffee tasted bitter now, but I drank it anyway. Normal, Melissa had said, for one more day. So I would give her that one more day of before. But tomorrow was going to be after. And after was going to change everything. If you've ever tried to pretend everything is fine when your entire world is on fire, you know it's not the big moments that break you. It's the small ones. The mundane questions, the routine interactions that used to feel effortless, but now require every ounce of energy you have just to maintain the illusion. Tyler came down at 6:47, headphones in, face buried in his phone, moving through the kitchen like a ghost who'd forgotten he had a body. 13 years old and already perfecting the teenage art of existing in the same space as his parents without actually acknowledging them. Normally, this irritated me. Today, I was grateful for it. Morning, I said, flipping eggs. He grunted something that might have been a greeting, grabbed orange juice from the fridge, and slouched into a chair at the table. His hair was sticking up in 3 different directions, and he was wearing the same hoodie he'd worn yesterday, probably slept in, definitely hadn't washed. Normal. This was normal. Emma appeared 10 minutes later, fully dressed, hair brushed, backpack already organized. 9 years old and more put together than any of us. She bounced into the kitchen like she'd been launched from a trampoline, all energy and optimism, and wrapped her arms around my waist from behind. Morning, Daddy. Are those scrambled eggs? Can I have cheese in mine? And can you make them extra fluffy? Tyler says my eggs are always better than his, but I think you just like me more. I make them exactly the same, I said, reaching back to ruffle her hair, feeling my heart crack slightly at how easy this was, how natural, how much I didn't want to lose it. Liar, Tyler muttered, without looking up from his phone. Language, Melissa said automatically as she entered the kitchen. Showered now, dressed for the day in jeans and a sweater, makeup carefully applied to hide the evidence of crying. She looked almost normal. Almost. But I could see the tightness around her eyes, the way her smile didn't quite reach the rest of her face. We moved through breakfast like actors hitting their marks. Tyler eating without tasting. Emma chattering about a spelling test she was nervous about. Melissa reminding them both about piano lessons after school. Me nodding and making appropriate responses while my mind spun in circles. 24 hours until I had to give Marcus an answer. 24 hours to decide whether to detonate this carefully constructed normalcy or preserve it at the cost of my own worth. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I ignored it. It buzzed again. Are you going to get that? Melissa asked, her tone careful, neutral. I pulled out the phone. 2 texts, both from Marcus. Legal team has additional findings. Important. Call when you can. Also, heard through the grapevine that Richardson's CFO is retiring next quarter. That position should have been yours 3 years ago. Just something to think about. I stared at the second message, feeling something hot and sharp twist in my chest. The CFO position. Marcus was right. I should have been considered for it 3 years ago when Henderson started making noises about retirement. I had the experience, the track record, the strategic vision. But Richard had brought in someone from outside, a Harvard MBA 10 years younger than me with half my practical experience, but the right pedigree, the right connections, the right last name that wasn't Richardson. I told myself it was fine, that my time would come, that patience and loyalty would be rewarded eventually. James? Melissa's voice cut through my thoughts. Who is it? Work, I said, which was technically true. I need to make a call before I head in. Emma looked up from her eggs, her face scrunched in confusion. But it's Friday. Friday is pancake day. You always make pancakes on Friday. She was right. For the past 4 years, since she'd started kindergarten, Friday mornings meant pancakes. It was our routine, our tradition, the kind of small ritual that made up the fabric of family life. And I'd forgotten completely. I'll make pancakes, Melissa said quickly, smoothly, covering for me. Dad has an important call. Go finish your eggs, sweetheart. Emma's face fell slightly, but she nodded and returned to her breakfast. Tyler hadn't even looked up. And I stood there, feeling like the worst kind of fraud, the kind who claimed his family was his priority while actively planning to upend their entire lives. I retreated to the office, closed the door, and called Marcus. He answered immediately. James, thanks for calling back. Listen, I need to tell you something that Jennifer's team uncovered late last night. I'm listening. Your contract has a clause, Section 22, buried in the miscellaneous provisions, that states if you're terminated for any reason other than gross misconduct or willful negligence, you're entitled to 6 months severance pay. Marcus paused, and I could hear papers shuffling. Here's the thing. Richardson never terminates people. He makes them quit. He reassigns them to meaningless positions, cuts their responsibilities, creates hostile work environments until they resign. Classic constructive dismissal. Okay, I said slowly, not quite seeing where this was going. So here's what I'm thinking. You don't resign. You make him fire you. Force him to either admit he's terminating you without cause, which triggers the severance clause, or keep you on while you transition to Meridian. Either way, you come out ahead. It was clever. Almost too clever. Marcus, if I force his hand like that, he'll make my life hell. And it doesn't solve the non-compete problem. Actually, it does. If he fires you, the non-compete becomes even harder to enforce. Courts don't like punishing employees for being terminated. But here's the real reason I'm suggesting this. It gives you negotiating leverage. You walk in there today, you tell him you've been offered another position, you see how he reacts, maybe he surprises you, maybe he actually recognizes your worth and makes a counteroffer. If he doesn't, if he tries to fire you or threaten you or intimidate you into staying, we have grounds to argue the contract was unconscionable from the start. I sat down at my desk, my head spinning. You're asking me to play chicken with my father-in-law. I'm asking you to stop letting him exploit the family relationship to keep you compliant, Marcus corrected. Look, James, I've been doing this a long time. I've seen how guys like Richardson operate. They use personal relationships as leverage to keep talented people underpaid and loyal. And the moment you try to extract fair value, they make you feel like you're betraying them, like you're being unreasonable, like you should be grateful for scraps. It's manipulation disguised as family values. Every word landed like a punch because every word was true. How many times had Richard invoked family when asking me to work late, to take on extra projects, to sacrifice personal time? How many times had I swallowed my frustration because family takes care of family? What if it backfires? I asked. What if he fires me on the spot and then fights the severance claim, and I'm stuck in legal limbo with no income? Then, Meridian advances you 3 months' salary immediately upon signing, no strings attached, while we fight it out in court. Marcus's voice was calm, certain. James, I'm not asking you to take this risk alone. I'm asking you to let me share it with you, because I believe in your value, and I'm willing to put money behind that belief. I looked around my office, at the degrees on the wall, the family photos on the desk, the window that overlooked our quiet suburban street. This room had been my sanctuary, the place where I'd strategized deals and written proposals and convinced myself that I was building something meaningful. Now it felt like a cage I'd constructed myself, one decision at a time, one compromise at a time, until I couldn't remember what freedom felt like. I need to think about it, I said finally. You've got until tomorrow morning, Marcus replied. But James, one more thing. This isn't just about money or career advancement. This is about whether you're willing to teach your kids that their worth is negotiable, that loyalty means accepting less than they deserve, that standing up for themselves is somehow wrong. Kids watch everything we do. They learn from our choices even when we think they're not paying attention. What do you want them to learn from this? The question hit harder than anything else he'd said, because he was right. Emma and Tyler were watching. Maybe not actively, not consciously, but they were absorbing the lessons of how I navigated this situation. If I backed down, if I accepted Richard's treatment because keeping the peace was easier than demanding respect, what would that teach them about their own worth? I'll call you tomorrow, I said, and ended the call before he could say anything else. I made it to the office by 9, navigating through the familiar parking garage with the weight of yesterday still pressing on my shoulders. The Richardson and Hale building looked different now, less like a monument to success and more like a prison I'd been voluntarily occupying for 12 years. My office was on the 33rd floor, a corner position with decent windows, though nothing like the views from Richard's penthouse suite. I'd earned this office 5 years ago, considered it a mark of achievement at the time. Now, it just felt like evidence of how far I still was from being valued appropriately. Patricia from the 47th floor was waiting at my desk when I arrived. My stomach dropped. Richard would like to see you, she said, her face carefully neutral in that way assistants perfect when they're delivering messages they know will cause problems. He asked me to come down personally rather than calling. When? Now, if possible. Of course, now. Because Richard Richardson didn't wait for convenient times. He summoned people when it suited him and expected them to drop everything and comply. I followed Patricia to the elevator, rode up in silence, and walked the familiar path to Richard's office with my heart hammering against my ribs. This was it. Whatever happened in the next hour would determine everything. Patricia gestured me in without knocking this time. Richard was at his desk, reading something on his computer screen, and he didn't look up when I entered. A power play. Making me wait. Reminding me who controlled this space, this conversation, this relationship. I sat down without being invited. That got his attention. He looked up, his eyebrows raised slightly. James, thank you for coming up. You summoned me, I replied evenly. I came. Something flickered across his face. surprise, maybe, or irritation at the tone. He was used to me being deferential, grateful, appropriately subordinate. "I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday," he said, leaning back in his chair, "and I realize I may have been abrupt. These are stressful times for the company, and I let that affect how I responded to your request. An apology, or something adjacent to one. I waited, saying nothing. So I've spoken with the board," he continued, "and we've agreed that a modest increase might be appropriate. 3%, effective next quarter. I think that's more than fair given the current economic climate." 3%. Not the 9 I'd asked for. Not even half of it. A token gesture designed to make me grateful while still keeping me underpaid. And he was presenting it like a gift, like I should be thanking him for the privilege of being slightly less exploited. "That's generous," I said, my voice flat. "But I'm afraid I can't accept it." Richard's expression hardened. "Can't accept it?" "I've received another offer," I said, and the words felt like jumping off a cliff, terrifying and liberating in equal measure. "A substantial offer, more than 3 times my current salary, actually. So 3%, while I appreciate the gesture, isn't really competitive." The silence that followed was absolute. I watched Richard's face cycle through emotions: confusion, disbelief, anger, calculation. He sat forward, his hands clasped on the desk, his jaw tight. "Another offer," he repeated slowly. "From whom?" "I'm not obligated to tell you that." "The hell you're not," Richard snapped, his composure cracking. "You work for me, James. You have a contract, a non-compete, confidentiality obligations. You can't just—" "I haven't accepted the offer yet," I interrupted. "I'm informing you, as a courtesy, that I'm considering other opportunities. I thought you should know." "A courtesy," Richard said, and now his voice was cold, dangerous. This was the side of him I'd seen in negotiations, when someone pushed too hard, when he decided to stop being charming and start being brutal. "Let me tell you about courtesy, James. Courtesy is spending 12 years developing your career. Courtesy is welcoming you into my family. Courtesy is overlooking your mediocre performance because you're married to my daughter." The words were designed to wound, and they did. But beneath the hurt, I felt something else rising. Fury. Clean, clear, and absolutely justified. "Mediocre performance," I repeated softly. "Is that what you call the 80 million in revenue I've generated for you over the last 3 years?" "You didn't generate anything," Richard shot back. "This company generated it. The resources we provided, the reputation we built, the infrastructure you exploited, that's what generated revenue. You were just the person executing strategies that any competent director could have implemented. Any competent director. Replaceable, interchangeable, worthless except for the value I extracted while following their blueprint." "I see," I said, standing up. "Thank you for clarifying your position." "Sit down," Richard commanded. "We're not finished." "Actually, we are." I turned toward the door. "If you walk out that door," Richard said, his voice sharp as broken glass, "if you go to work for one of our competitors, I will sue you for everything you have. Your house, your savings, your children's college funds. I will bury you in legal fees until you're bankrupt and unemployable. Do you understand me?" I stopped at the door, my hand on the handle, and looked back at him. This man who had been at my wedding, who had held my children when they were born, who had told me more than once that I was like a son to him. And I saw him clearly now, maybe for the first time ever. Not as family, but as a businessman protecting his assets by threatening the man who'd married his daughter. I understand perfectly, I said. Thank you for making this decision easy. I walked out, past Patricia's carefully averted eyes, past the mahogany paneling and museum art, past the trappings of success that suddenly looked like exactly what they were: expensive decorations designed to make exploitation look prestigious. In the elevator, my hands were shaking. My heart was racing. My phone was already in my hand, Marcus Webb's number on the screen. I pressed call. James, Marcus answered. Tell me you're ready. I'm ready, I said. Draft the contract. I'll sign it today. Best decision you'll ever make, Marcus said, and I could hear the satisfaction in his voice. Welcome to Meridian. The elevator doors opened on the 33rd floor. My floor. For now. But by Monday, it wouldn't be anymore. By Monday, everything would change. There's a moment in every irreversible decision when time seems to stop. When you're suspended between what was and what will be, when the bridge you've just burned is still smoking behind you, and the path ahead is nothing but darkness and possibility. I stood in that elevator, descending from the 47th floor with Marcus Webb's voice still in my ear, and I felt that suspension, that terrible, exhilarating moment of free fall before you know whether you're flying or plummeting. I'm sending the contract to your personal email right now, Marcus was saying, his voice crisp with efficiency. Sign it. Scan it back to me. We'll have you on Meridian's payroll by Monday morning. I'm also connecting you with Jennifer Castellano. She'll need to start building your defense immediately. Richardson's threat wasn't idle, James. He will come after you. I know, I said. And I did know. I'd seen Richard Richardson destroy people who crossed him, competitors who underestimated him, employees who'd betrayed his trust. He didn't just win, he obliterated. He made examples. Good. Knowing is half the battle. The other half is not backing down when it gets ugly. Marcus paused, and his tone softened slightly. How are you feeling? Really? I looked at my reflection in the polished elevator doors, 38 years old, wearing a suit I'd bought on sale 3 years ago, because I couldn't justify spending money on clothes when the kids needed school supplies. My face looked older than it had yesterday morning. Harder. Like something fundamental had shifted in my bone structure. Honestly, I feel like I just stepped off a cliff. You did, Marcus said. But there's a difference between falling and jumping. You jumped. That takes courage most people don't have. The elevator reached the 33rd floor. The doors opened onto familiar territory. The bullpen where my team worked, the conference rooms where I'd run countless strategy sessions, the coffee station where I'd wasted hours of my life making small talk about football and weekend plans. All of it looked different now. Temporary. Already part of my past rather than my present. I need to go, I told Marcus. I have some things to take care of here. Don't take anything proprietary, Marcus warned immediately. No client files, no strategy documents, nothing that could be used as evidence that you violated your confidentiality agreement. Personal items only. And James, assume everything you do today is being watched. He was right. Richard would be expecting me to gather ammunition, to steal client lists, or strategic documents. He'd probably already instructed IT to monitor my computer activity. The paranoia wasn't unreasonable. It was strategic. Understood, I said, and ended the call. My office suddenly felt like enemy territory. I moved quickly, pulling personal items from drawers, family photos, the good pens Melissa had given me for our anniversary, the coffee mug Emma had painted in 3rd grade with "World's Best Dad," written in crooked letters. Evidence of a life lived parallel to my career, constantly intersecting, but never quite merging. I left everything else. The files, the notebooks filled with strategy sessions, The laptop that belonged to Richardson and Hale. Let them audit it. Let them search for evidence of betrayal. They'd find nothing but 12 years of exemplary work and absolute loyalty right up until the moment that loyalty stopped being reciprocated. My phone buzzed. An email from Marcus with a PDF attachment. Employment agreement. James Carter, Meridian Strategic Group. I opened it with fingers that weren't quite steady. The terms were exactly as he'd described. $420,000 base salary. Performance bonuses with no ceiling. Full benefits, equity options. A signing bonus of $50,000. Start date, Monday, February 19th, 2024. 4 days from now, 4 days to dismantle 12 years of my life. I skimmed the rest of the document. Standard non-disclosure agreements, intellectual property clauses, at-will employment terms. Nothing like the cage Richardson and Hale had locked me in. This was a contract between equals, between a company that valued talent and an employee who understood his worth. My finger hovered over the signature line. This was it. The actual point of no return. Once I signed this document, once I committed myself to Meridian, there would be no walking it back. No apologizing to Richard. No pretending this was all a negotiation tactic. No salvaging the comfortable fiction that I was still part of the Richardson family. I thought about Melissa, probably at home right now, trying to maintain the illusion of normalcy. I thought about Emma and Tyler, oblivious to the earthquake that was about to reshape their lives. I thought about Thanksgiving dinners and Christmas mornings and birthday parties that would never be the same. Then I thought about Richard's laugh, his casual dismissal of my worth, his threat to destroy me financially if I dared to seek fair compensation elsewhere. I signed the document, scanned it, sent it back to Marcus with a subject line that felt both mundane and monumental. Executed contract, James Carter. Done. The email whooshed away, carrying with it any possibility of retreat. I sat there in my office, surrounded by the skeletal remains of my career at Richardson and Hale, and waited to feel something. Regret, relief, terror, triumph. Instead, I felt nothing. Just a strange, hollow numbness, like I'd used up all my emotional capacity in the last 24 hours and had nothing left to give. My office phone rang. I stared at it for 3 rings before answering, already knowing who it would be. James Carter? It's Patricia. Her voice was tight, uncomfortable. Richard needs you to come back up to the 47th floor immediately. He's asked me to tell you that you should bring your laptop, your badge, and any company property in your possession. So it was happening already. The termination. The exile. The public spectacle of my dismissal designed to intimidate anyone else who might consider similar defection. Tell Richard I'll be up in 5 minutes, I said, and hung up before she could respond. I gathered my laptop, my badge, my company credit card, left the personal items in a box under my desk. I'd come back for them later, or maybe I wouldn't. Maybe I'd just leave them here as monuments to a life I was walking away from. The elevator ride up felt different this time. Final. I watched the floors tick by and thought about all the times I'd made this journey over the past 12 years. Hopeful, early on, when every summons felt like an opportunity. Routine, in the middle years, when I'd become comfortable in my role. Resentful, recently, when the patterns had become too clear to ignore. Now I felt something like peace. The peace that comes from finally telling the truth after years of polite lies. Patricia looked stricken when I arrived. She'd been Richard's assistant for 26 years, had probably witnessed countless terminations, but this one clearly bothered her. Maybe because she'd known me for so long. Maybe because she understood exactly what was happening and didn't agree with it. "He's waiting," she said softly, and there was apology in her voice. "It's okay, Patricia," I said. "None of this is your fault." I walked into Richard's office for what I knew would be the last time. He wasn't alone. Gerald Hutchins, the head of HR, stood near the window with a folder in his hands. Susan Park, the company's chief legal counsel, sat in one of the leather chairs with her laptop open. An audience. Witnesses. Protection against any claims I might make later about what was said or done in this room. "James," Richard said, his voice ice. "Thank you for coming. Please, sit down." I remained standing. "I'd rather not." A muscle twitched in Richard's jaw. He wasn't used to small rebellions, to people refusing even minor requests. "Fine, we'll make this quick then. As of this moment, your employment with Richardson and Hale is terminated, effective immediately." "On what grounds?" I asked, keeping my voice level. Gerald stepped forward, consulting his folder. "Insubordination, failure to maintain professional conduct, threatening behavior towards senior management." I almost laughed. "Threatening behavior? I asked for a raise and informed you I was considering other opportunities. That's standard professional practice, not insubordination." "You threatened to leave this company during a critical business period," Richard said coldly. "You disrupted operations with your selfish demands. You put your personal interests above the good of the team." "I put my interests above being exploited," I corrected. "There's a difference." Susan Park spoke up, her voice clinical. "Mr. Carter, you're being terminated for cause. This means you forfeit any claim to severance, benefits continuation, or positive references. Additionally, your non-compete clause remains in full effect. If you violate any terms of your employment agreement, this company will pursue legal action to the fullest extent allowed by law." "Interesting," I said, "because terminated for cause requires gross misconduct or willful negligence, according to Section 22 of my contract. Asking for a raise doesn't meet that threshold. So either this termination is wrongful, or it's without cause, which means I'm entitled to 6 months severance as specified in Section 22, paragraph B." The room went very quiet. Gerald glanced at Susan. Susan's fingers stopped moving on her laptop. Richard's face darkened. "You've been talking to lawyers," Richard said slowly. "I've been reading my contract," I replied. "Something I should have done more carefully 12 years ago." "This is exactly the kind of adversarial behavior that led to your termination," Susan said, recovering quickly. "You're not entitled to severance, Mr. Carter. The company is prepared to defend that position." "Then I guess we'll see each other in court," I said pleasantly. I set my laptop, badge, and credit card on Richard's desk. "I believe these belong to you." "Where are you going?" Richard demanded as I turned toward the door. "We're not finished." "Actually, we are. You've terminated me. I've acknowledged the termination. There's nothing else to discuss." I paused at the door, looked back at the three of them, at the tableau of corporate power arrayed against the employee who dared to demand his worth. "Oh, and Richard? I signed with Meridian this morning. Marcus Webb sends his regards." I walked out before anyone could respond, past Patricia's desk, past the mahogany and art, into the elevator that descended quickly, efficiently, away from everything I'd built over the past 12 years. My phone rang before I reached the lobby. Jennifer Castellano. "James, Marcus just forwarded me your contract. Congratulations. Now, I need you to tell me exactly what happened in that termination meeting. Word for word if you can." I recounted the conversation as I walked through the lobby, through the revolving doors, into the February cold. The city was bright and sharp around me, And for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. Perfect, Jennifer said when I finished. They terminated you for cause without actually having cause. We can challenge that, probably settle for at least 3 months severance before it even goes to trial. And James, document everything. Every email, every phone call, every interaction. If Richardson tries to intimidate you or interfere with your transition to Meridian, I want evidence. He will, I said. You can count on it. Good. Let him. Every action he takes builds our case. She paused. How are you holding up? I don't know yet, I admitted. Ask me in a few days. Fair enough. I'll be in touch. I ended the call and stood on the sidewalk outside Richardson and Hale Industries, looking up at the 47 stories of steel and glass. People were streaming past me, entering and exiting the building, living their professional lives, completely unaware that mine had just ended and restarted simultaneously. My car was in the garage. I should get it, drive home, tell Melissa what had happened. Face the music, begin the difficult conversation about what came next. But I wasn't ready yet. I needed a moment. Just one moment of solitude before I had to be a husband again, a father, a man with responsibilities and relationships that were about to be tested in ways I couldn't fully imagine. I walked down the block to a coffee shop. I'd passed 1,000 times, but never entered. I always got coffee at the office, free coffee, another small benefit I'd accepted without questioning its value. The shop was warm and crowded, filled with people working on laptops, having meetings, living their lives in spaces that weren't tied to corporate hierarchies and family obligations. I ordered a black coffee and sat by the window, watching the city move past. Business people in expensive suits, college students with backpacks, delivery drivers rushing between stops. Everyone moving with purpose, with direction, with the certainty that they knew where they were going. I had no idea where I was going. I had a new job, yes. A better salary. A company that claimed to value me. But I'd also just detonated my marriage, alienated my in-laws, and set in motion a legal battle that could drain our savings and poison our family relationships for years. Had it been worth it? I sipped my coffee. It was bitter, too hot, better than anything I'd ever had at Richardson and Hale, and realized I didn't know the answer yet. Maybe I wouldn't know for months, maybe years. Maybe I'd spend the rest of my life wondering if I'd made the right choice in that elevator, in Richard's office, at my desk when I signed Marcus Webb's contract. But I also knew this. I couldn't have made any other choice. Not without losing something essential, something more valuable than peace or comfort or family harmony. I couldn't have chosen to stay invisible. My phone buzzed, a text from Melissa. Emma's school called. She's in the nurse's office with a stomach ache. I'm going to pick her up. Where are you? Reality, crashing back in. The life I still had to live. The responsibilities I still had to honor. The family that still needed me, even though I just destroyed the foundation we'd built together. I typed back. Got fired. On my way home. We need to talk. 3 sentences that contained entire universes of consequence. I finished my coffee, left the warm safety of the shop, and walked toward the parking garage. Toward my car, toward home, toward Melissa and the conversation that would determine whether we survived this or whether I'd burn down my marriage along with my career. The cold air bit at my face. The sun was high and bright, indifferent to human drama. And somewhere behind me, in an office on the 47th floor, Richard Richardson was probably already planning his revenge. But I was done being afraid of him, done being grateful for scraps, done being invisible. I had jumped off the cliff. Now, I just had to figure out how to land. The drive home took 17 minutes. I know because I counted every one of them, watching the dashboard clock tick forward while my mind rehearsed and discarded a dozen different ways to tell my wife that I just destroyed our comfortable life in the name of principles she might not share. Got fired. On my way home, we need to talk. 3 sentences that had probably been vibrating in Melissa's pocket for the last 10 minutes, detonating small bombs of anxiety with each word. Got fired. Not, I quit, or I resigned, or I made a career change. Fired. Passive. Like something that had been done to me rather than something I'd orchestrated. Except it wasn't passive at all. I'd walked into that office knowing exactly what would happen. I'd signed Marcus Webb's contract before the termination meeting even started. I'd chosen this path with open eyes and deliberate intent. But how did I explain that to Melissa? How did I make her understand that getting fired was a victory, not a defeat? That being escorted out of Richardson and Hale after 12 years was liberation, not humiliation. Our street appeared through the windshield, tree-lined, quiet, expensive in the way that suggested success without being ostentatious about it. The houses all looked the same, well-maintained colonials with 2-car garages and professional landscaping, homes owned by people who'd made it into the upper middle class and planned to stay there. Safe, predictable, stable. I pulled into our driveway behind Melissa's SUV and sat there for a moment, engine idling, heater blasting warm air that did nothing to touch the cold spreading through my chest. Through the living room window, I could see Melissa moving past, pacing, probably, the way she always did when she was anxious. Emma was likely on the couch, her mysterious stomachache probably nothing more than childhood anxiety manifesting physically, the way it sometimes did when she sensed tension between her parents. Even if she couldn't name it, I turned off the car, gathered my box of personal items from the passenger seat, the coffee mug, the photos, the pens. Evidence of a life that had ended 3 hours ago. The front door opened before I reached it. Melissa stood there, backlit by the warm interior lights, her arms crossed over her chest in a posture that was half defensive, half self-protective. Her face was carefully composed, but I could see the effort it took to maintain that composure, could see the cracks forming at the edges. "Emma?" I asked, because that was easier than jumping directly into the chasm between us. "Lying down. She's fine. The nurse said it's probably stress." Melissa's voice was flat, professional. The tone she used with service providers and telemarketers, not with her husband. "Come inside. We shouldn't do this on the front porch." I followed her into the house, into the living room where we'd spent countless evenings watching movies and helping with homework and pretending we had our lives figured out. The room looked different now, or maybe I looked different, and everything else had stayed the same. Melissa closed the front door and leaned against it, her hands behind her back, gripping the handle like she needed something solid to hold on to. "Tell me what happened." I set the box down on the coffee table and remained standing. Sitting felt wrong, too casual for what we were about to discuss. "I went to see your father this morning. He offered me 3%. 3%, Melissa repeated quietly. "After you asked for 9? "After I generated $80 million in revenue for his company over the last 3 years. I corrected. 3% wasn't an acknowledgement of my worth, Mel. It was an insult wrapped in the language of generosity. "So you turned it down?" "I turned it down. And I told him I'd received another offer, a substantially better offer." I watched her process this, saw the moment when she understood what I was saying. "I told him I'd signed with Meridian this morning. The silence that followed felt like falling. Like the moment between losing your balance and hitting the ground. When you know impact is inevitable, but hasn't arrived yet. You signed, Melissa said finally, her voice barely audible. You already signed, before coming home, before talking to me. I talked to you yesterday, I said, but even as the words left my mouth, I knew how weak they sounded. You knew I was considering it. Considering, Melissa pushed off from the door, started pacing the way I'd known she would. Considering means we discuss it together. We weigh the options. We make a decision as a family. You didn't consider anything, James. You just did it. You blew up our lives without even giving me a chance to... She stopped, pressed her hands to her face. Do you have any idea what you've done? I know exactly what I've done, I said. And now my own frustration was rising, sharp and defensive. I've chosen to be valued at my actual worth instead of accepting whatever scraps your father felt like throwing me. I've chosen to teach our children that loyalty shouldn't be one-sided. I've chosen myself, Melissa. For the first time in 12 years, I've chosen myself. You've chosen to start a war with my father, she shot back. You've chosen to put me in the middle of a fight between my husband and my family. You've chosen to make holidays impossible and family gatherings toxic, and, her voice cracked, you've chosen this without asking what I wanted. What did you want? I asked, and the question came out sharper than I intended. For me to stay? To keep working for a man who laughed at me for asking for fair compensation? To teach our kids that it's okay to be exploited as long as it keeps the family comfortable? I wanted you to wait, Melissa said, and now there were tears streaming down her face. One more day, James. You promised me one more day to figure this out together. And you couldn't even give me that. You went behind my back and signed a contract with my father's biggest competitor, and now you're standing here acting like I'm the unreasonable one for being upset. She was right. God, she was right. I had promised her today 24 hours of normalcy, of pretending everything was fine, and I'd lasted less than 6 hours before detonating everything. Your father didn't give me a choice, I said, but it sounded like an excuse, even to my own ears. He called me up to his office. He offered 3% like it was a gift. And when I told him I had another offer, he threatened to destroy me, to sue me into bankruptcy, to take our house, our savings, the kids' college funds. He didn't ask what I wanted, Mel. He told me what would happen if I dared to leave. Melissa stopped pacing, turned to face me fully. And you think signing with Meridian will make that better? You think he won't follow through on those threats now? I think he'll try, I admitted. But I also think he'll lose. I've got lawyers, Mel. Good ones. Marcus Webb is covering all legal fees. We have a strong case. We, Melissa interrupted. There is no we in this, James. This is you and Marcus Webb against my father. I'm not part of your case. I'm just the collateral damage. The words landed like physical blows, because she was right about that too. I'd been thinking about this as my fight, my decision, my career. But every choice I made rippled outward, touching everyone around me. And Melissa was caught directly in the blast radius. I'm sorry, I said, and meant it. I'm sorry I didn't wait. I'm sorry I made this decision without you. But Mel, I need you to understand, I couldn't stay. Not after yesterday. Not after your father made it clear that 12 years of loyalty meant nothing compared to saving a few percentage points on payroll. So our marriage means nothing compared to your pride? Melissa asked, and the question was like a knife between my ribs. That's not what this is, I said, but my voice lacked conviction. Isn't it? She moved closer, and I could see every detail of her pain. The redness around her eyes, the tightness of her jaw, the way her hands were shaking slightly. You know what happens now? My mother will call. She'll be crying, asking how we could do this to them. My father will turn the whole family against us. Christmases will be at separate houses. The kids will have to choose between their parents and their grandparents. My siblings will stop inviting us to things. We'll be the family pariahs, James. The ones who betrayed the Richardsons. And for what? More money? For respect, I said quietly. For the acknowledgement that my labor has value. For the right to advocate for myself without being threatened or diminished or laughed at. You want respect? Melissa's laugh was harsh, bitter. You just made an enemy of one of the most powerful men in this industry. You just guaranteed that half the people we know will take his side over ours. How is that respect? I didn't have an answer for that. Or rather, I had an answer. That respect from people who would take Richard's side wasn't worth having. That choosing justice over peace was its own form of dignity, but I knew those answers would sound hollow to Melissa right now, would sound like justifications for choices that were hurting her. Upstairs, I heard movement. Emma, probably awake and listening to her parents fight. Another casualty of my decision. Another person whose life I was reshaping without permission. I need air, Melissa said suddenly. I need to think. I need to not be in this house with you right now. Mel, don't. She held up a hand. Just don't. I can't process this right now. I can't be the supportive wife who tells you it's all going to be okay, because I don't know if it will be. I don't know if we will be. She grabbed her keys from the bowl by the door and walked out without looking back. A moment later, I heard her SUV start, heard the sound of gravel under tires as she backed out of the driveway too fast. Then silence. I stood in the living room surrounded by the architecture of our life together, the furniture we'd chosen, the photos we'd framed, the carefully curated evidence of a happy family, and felt the full weight of what I'd done crash down on me. Dad? I turned to find Emma standing at the top of the stairs, her hair messed from lying down, her face worried in that particular way children's faces get when they know something is wrong but don't understand what. Hey, sweetheart, I said, forcing normalcy into my voice. How's your stomach? Better. She came down slowly, one step at a time, watching me like I might shatter if she moved too quickly. Where did Mom go? Just out for a drive. She needed some air. Because you got fired? Christ. She'd heard. Of course she'd heard. The text message, the raised voices, the front door slamming. Children heard everything, understood more than we gave them credit for. Yes, I said, because lying felt worse than the truth. Because I got fired. Why? Emma sat on the bottom step, her knees pulled up to her chest. Did you do something bad? No, I asked for a raise, and when I didn't get it, I took a job somewhere else. Your grandfather... I stopped. Recalibrated. The company didn't like that, so they let me go. Grandpa fired you? Emma's eyes were wide. But your family? Out of the mouths of children. The exact question I'd been asking myself for 24 hours, distilled down to its simplest, most painful form. Sometimes family and business don't mix well, I said, sitting down beside her on the step. Sometimes people we love make decisions that hurt us, even when they don't mean to. Or maybe especially when they don't mean to. Is that why Mom's crying? Emma leaned against my shoulder, and I put my arm around her, felt her small frame against mine, and wanted desperately to protect her from all of this. To go back in time and make different choices, or better ones, or at least ones that didn't involve my 9-year-old daughter asking why her grandfather fired her father. Mom's upset because things are changing, I said carefully. And change is scary, even when it's for good reasons. But we're going to be okay, sweetheart. I promise you that. Tyler says you and Mom are getting divorced. My heart stopped. What? No. Emma, No. Where did he? He heard you fighting last night. He said that's what happens before people get divorced. They fight about money and then they get divorced. She pulled back to look at me, her eyes filled with tears. Are you and Mom getting divorced? No, I said firmly, hoping desperately that it was true. Mom and I are having a hard time right now. We're working through some difficult things, but we love each other, and we love you and your brother, and we're going to figure this out together, okay? Emma nodded, but didn't look convinced. And why would she? I wasn't convinced either. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out to find 3 missed calls from a number I didn't recognize and a voicemail notification. I put it on speaker so Emma could hear, proof that I wasn't hiding anything, that some parts of life were still normal and transparent. The voicemail was from Eleanor Richardson, Melissa's mother. James. Her voice was ice-wrapped in velvet, cultured rage, performing civility. I just spoke with Richard. I cannot believe, after everything this family has done for you, that you would betray us this way. Working for Marcus Webb? After my husband gave you a career, gave you opportunities, welcomed you into our family? A pause, and when she spoke again, the civility was gone. You are no longer welcome in our home. Do not call. Do not visit. If Melissa comes to her senses and leaves you, she and the children will always have a place with us. But you? You made your choice. Now live with it. The message ended. Emma stared at the phone like it had bitten her. Did Grandma just say we can't visit anymore? Her voice was small, confused. She said I can't visit. I corrected gently. You and Tyler and Mom can visit whenever you want. But what about you? I'll be fine, sweetheart. Adults have disagreements sometimes. It doesn't change how much Grandma and Grandpa love you. Even as I said it, I wondered if it was true. Or if the Richardsons' love was as conditional as their professional loyalty, extended freely as long as you stayed in line, withdrawn the moment you stepped out of formation. Emma leaned against me again, and we sat there on the stairs in the quiet house, listening to the clock tick in the kitchen and the furnace hum in the basement. Normal sounds. Domestic sounds. The soundtrack of a life that was already irrevocably changed, even if the architecture hadn't caught up yet. My phone buzzed again. A text from Marcus Webb. Heard you got terminated. Good. Makes our case stronger. Legal team is already preparing response to any action R&H might take. How are you holding up? I didn't respond. Didn't know how to explain that holding up was a relative term when your 9-year-old daughter was asking about divorce, and your mother-in-law was leaving voicemails about banishment, and your wife had fled the house because she couldn't stand to look at you. Another buzz. Jennifer Castellano this time. Need you to forward any communication from Richardson family members. Everything is evidence now. Stay strong. Stay strong, as if strength was a choice. As if I could simply decide to be unaffected by the systematic destruction of every relationship I'd built over the past 12 years. But maybe that was the point. Maybe strength wasn't about being unaffected. Maybe it was about being completely devastated and choosing to stand anyway. Choosing to believe that the wreckage was worth it, that something better would rise from the ashes, that teaching my children to value themselves was more important than maintaining comfortable lies. Dad? Emma's voice pulled me back. Are you going to be okay? I looked down at my daughter, at her worried face and tear-stained cheeks, at the physical manifestation of everything I was fighting for and everything I was risking. Yes, I said, and tried to believe it. I'm going to be okay. We're all going to be okay. She nodded and squeezed my hand, and we sat there together in the ruins of the life I'd known, waiting for Melissa to come back. Waiting for whatever came next. Melissa didn't come home that night. Emma fell asleep around 9, curled up on the couch with her head in my lap, while I pretended to watch television. Tyler had stayed in his room all evening, headphones on, door closed, communicating his disapproval through pointed absence. I carried Emma up to bed, tucked her in, watched her face relax into the peaceful unconsciousness of childhood, where problems dissolved into dreams, and envied her that escape. Downstairs, the house felt enormous and empty. I kept expecting to hear Melissa's car in the driveway, kept checking my phone for texts that never came. At midnight, I finally broke down and called her. It went straight to voicemail. Mel, please. I know you're angry. I know I screwed up, but please just let me know you're safe. You don't have to come home. You don't have to talk to me. Just let me know you're okay. I sent a text with the same message. Then another an hour later. Then finally, at 2 a.m., my phone buzzed with a response. Staying at Sarah's. Need space. Please don't call again. Sarah. Her college roommate, the one who'd never particularly liked me, who'd told Melissa at our wedding that she was settling for safe instead of reaching for exciting. Of course she'd gone to Sarah. Of course she'd chosen the friend who would validate her anger instead of challenging it. I slept on the couch that night, if you could call it sleeping. Mostly I lay there in the dark, listening to the house settle around me, replaying the last 48 hours on an endless loop, looking for the moment where I could have chosen differently, where I could have been smarter, more diplomatic, more patient, where I could have gotten what I needed without destroying everything else. But every alternative path I imagined led to the same place. Me, diminished. Me, accepting less than I was worth. Me, teaching my children that dignity was negotiable and self-respect was something you sacrificed to keep other people comfortable. So maybe there had been no better path. Maybe there had only been this one. Painful and destructive and necessary. Saturday morning arrived with cruel normalcy. The sun rose. The coffee maker beeped. Emma came downstairs asking about breakfast, like the world hadn't fundamentally shifted on its axis. I made pancakes because it was Saturday, and that's what I always did on Saturdays. And if I couldn't maintain my marriage, maybe I could at least maintain pancakes. Tyler appeared around 10, summoned by the smell of food, if not by affection. He slumped into a chair at the kitchen table, his hair a disaster, his expression carefully neutral. "Where's Mom?" he asked, not looking at me. "At Aunt Sarah's. She needed some space." "Because of what you did?" It wasn't a question, but I answered it anyway. "Because of decisions we're both struggling with?" "Yes." "You mean because you quit your job to work for Grandpa's enemy, and now the whole family hates us?" Tyler finally looked at me, and his eyes were hard in a way that made him look much older than 13. Dylan's mom texted his phone last night. She said we probably can't come to their lake house this summer because of family complications. That's code for your dad screwed everything up. Dylan, Richard and Eleanor's grandson through Melissa's older brother, Marcus. Tyler's cousin and best friend. Another casualty I hadn't fully considered when I'd signed that contract. "I'm sorry," I said, and the words felt microscopic compared to the magnitude of what I was apologizing for. "I know this is hard." "Hard?" Tyler's laugh was bitter. Too bitter for someone who should still be worried about homework and video games instead of the family politics. "Dad, everyone knows. Marcus Jr. posted something on Instagram about fake family members who stab you in the back." Grandma called Mom crying. "Emma's friends are asking why we can't come to Christmas at Grandpa's house anymore. This isn't hard. This is a disaster." He was right. Of course he was right. I'd been so focused on the principle of the thing, the justice, the dignity, the refusal to be exploited, that I'd underestimated the social cost. The Richardson family wasn't just my in-laws. They were our entire social structure. The kids' cousins, Melissa's siblings, the country club membership, the vacation homes we were welcome to use, the network of connections and relationships that had made up the fabric of our lives, all of it, gone. Not because I'd done something wrong, but because I'd refused to keep accepting wrong being done to me. I know you're angry, I said carefully, and you have every right to be. But Tyler, I need you to understand something. What your grandfather did, laughing at me for asking for fair compensation, threatening to destroy me financially if I left, that's not how family should treat family. That's not what love looks like. So you're saying Grandpa doesn't love us? Tyler's voice rose. Because he's always been there for us. Always. He paid for my camp last summer when you said we couldn't afford it. He bought Emma her piano. He takes us skiing every year. That's love, Dad. What you did, walking away from the family, that's not love. That's just selfish. The words hit like hammers. Because there was truth in them, twisted though it was. Richard had been generous with his grandchildren, had provided experiences and opportunities I couldn't afford on my Richardson and Hale salary, had played the role of beloved patriarch with perfect consistency. But that generosity had come with invisible strings attached, had been predicated on my continued compliance, my perpetual gratitude, my willingness to accept less than I was worth because challenging him meant losing access to everything he provided. That wasn't love. That was control, dressed up in expensive wrapping paper. Your grandfather's generosity came with conditions, I said quietly. And one of those conditions was that I could never advocate for my own worth without being seen as ungrateful or disloyal. That's not a relationship, Tyler. That's a transaction. Whatever. Tyler pushed back from the table, his pancakes barely touched. I'm going to Dylan's. At least someone in this family still talks to us. He was gone before I could respond, the front door slamming with enough force to rattle the windows. Emma looked up from her plate, her eyes wide. Is Tyler right? She asked quietly. Are we not a family anymore? We're always a family, I said, moving to sit beside her. Tyler, you, Mom, and me, we're always going to be a family. What's happening with Grandpa and Grandma is complicated, but it doesn't change that. But Tyler said everyone hates us now. Not everyone. Just some people are taking Grandpa's side. That happens sometimes when adults have disagreements. But the people who really love us, who really matter, they'll understand. Even as I said it, I wondered who those people were. Who, in our carefully constructed social circle, would be willing to side with us against Richard Richardson? Who would risk his displeasure to maintain a relationship with us? The answer, I suspected, was very few. Maybe none. My phone rang. Marcus Webb. I need to take this, I told Emma, and stepped into the office, closing the door behind me. James, how was your first night of freedom? Marcus's voice was cheerful, energized, completely oblivious to the wreckage my freedom had created. Complicated, I said. I bet. Listen, I wanted to give you a heads up. Richardson filed an injunction this morning, trying to prevent you from starting at Meridian on Monday. Claims you have proprietary information that would give us an unfair competitive advantage. It's bullshit, of course, and it won't hold. But Jennifer wants to conference with you today to prepare a response. An injunction. Of course, Richard Richardson didn't make idle threats. He made good on them with overwhelming force and expensive lawyers. What does that mean for Monday? I asked. Means you show up anyway. The hearing isn't until Wednesday. Judge probably won't grant the injunction, but even if he does, we appeal immediately. Either way, you're on Meridian's payroll as of Monday morning. Marcus paused. How's the family handling it? Wife's at a friend's house. Teenager hates me. 9-year-old is confused. My mother-in-law left a voicemail yesterday effectively disowning me. So, about as well as can be expected. Christ. Marcus's tone shifted, became more serious. I'm sorry, James. I know I pushed you toward this decision, and I don't want to minimize what it's costing you personally. But, for what it's worth, I've seen this pattern before. The initial shock is brutal, but things settle. People adjust. In 6 months, this will all feel different. 6 months. As if 6 months was a short time. As if I could just white-knuckle my way through half a year of family dissolution and come out the other side with everything intact. I hope you're right, I said, but I didn't believe it. Jennifer will call you in an hour, Marcus said. Be ready to walk through every client interaction you've had in the last 2 years. Richardson's going to claim you stole trade secrets, so we need to document that everything you know came from your own expertise, not company property. After Marcus hung up, I sat at my desk and pulled up my email, dozens of new messages, most from people I didn't know. Richardson and Hale colleagues sending carefully worded notes that read like condolences. Sorry to hear about your departure. Best wishes in your future endeavors. Hope everything works out for you. Not a single one acknowledged that I'd been fired. Not one questioned the official narrative. They were all covering their own asses, making sure their messages couldn't be used as evidence of disloyalty to Richard Richardson. There was one email that stood out, though, from Patricia, Richard's assistant, sent from a personal Gmail account. James, I probably shouldn't be writing this, but I wanted you to know that what happened to you was wrong. I've worked for Richard for 26 years, and I've seen him do this before. Treat people as disposable the moment they stop being convenient. You were right to leave. You were right to stand up for yourself. I'm retiring at the end of this year. I've already submitted my notice. I can't do this anymore. Can't watch good people get chewed up and spit out while pretending it's all justified. I don't know if this helps or matters, but I wanted you to know that at least one person in that building knows you got screwed. Take care of yourself. Patricia. I read the email 3 times, feeling something loosen in my chest. Validation. Not from Marcus Webb, who had his own agenda. Not from Jennifer Castellano, who was being paid to support my position. But from someone who'd witnessed everything, who had no reason to lie, who was risking nothing by telling me the truth. I was right. What had happened to me was wrong. And Patricia, who'd seen it all, who'd kept Richard Richardson's secrets for 26 years, was walking away too. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't selfish. I wasn't betraying my family. I was surviving a system designed to exploit me, and I'd finally found the courage to say no. The doorbell rang, pulling me out of my thoughts. I walked downstairs to find Melissa standing on the front porch with her keys in her hand, looking exhausted and uncertain. We stared at each other through the glass door for a long moment before I opened it. Hi, I said. Hi. She didn't move to come inside. Is Emma okay? She's fine. Worried about you. Tyler went to Dylan's, or tried to anyway. I don't know if he actually made it. Melissa nodded, looked past me into the house, like she was trying to remember if she still lived here. I can't stay. I'm not ready yet. But I needed to get some clothes, and I wanted to check on the kids. Mel, please don't. She held up a hand. I'm here for 5 minutes. I'm getting my things and leaving again. We can talk later when I'm ready. But right now, I just need you to let me do this without making it harder. I stepped aside, let her pass into the house. Watched her climb the stairs to our bedroom with the careful movements of someone walking through a space that used to be home but now felt foreign. Emma appeared in the living room doorway, saw her mother, and ran to the stairs. Mom, you came back. Melissa turned and her face crumpled. She sat on the stairs and pulled Emma into a fierce hug, and I watched from the bottom of the staircase as my wife and daughter held each other and cried. Watched as Emma whispered things I couldn't hear, and Melissa stroked her hair and promised things I hoped she could keep. After 5 minutes, exactly 5 minutes, like she'd set a timer, Melissa stood up, kissed Emma's forehead, and continued up to the bedroom. She emerged 10 minutes later with an overnight bag and her work laptop, her face carefully composed again. "I'll call you tomorrow," she said at the door. "We need to figure out logistics. Who's staying where, how we're handling the kids, all of it. Melissa, please, can we just talk? Really talk?" She looked at me, and her eyes were red but dry. "I've been talking to Sarah all night. She said something that stuck with me. You can't negotiate with someone who's already made up their mind." "You'd already decided, James. Before our conversation, before asking my opinion, you'd already chosen Marcus Webb and Meridian over everything else. So what is there to talk about?" "I chose myself," I said quietly. "Not over you. Not over the kids. I chose to stop accepting abuse and exploitation just because it came wrapped in family rhetoric." "And I'm supposed to celebrate that?" Melissa's voice was sharp. "Congratulate you for blowing up our lives in the name of principle?" "I'm not asking you to celebrate. I'm asking you to understand." "Well, I don't," she said. "I don't understand how you could make a decision this big without really including me. I don't understand how you could risk everything we've built without even trying to find another way. I don't understand." Her voice broke. "I don't understand how I'm supposed to choose between my husband and my family." "You shouldn't have to choose," I said. "Your father is the one forcing that choice by making this about loyalty instead of justice." "But you knew he would," Melissa replied. "You knew exactly how he'd react, and you did it anyway. So don't pretend you're the victim here, James. You made this bed. You don't get to complain about sleeping in it." She left, and this time I didn't try to stop her. Emma stood in the living room, watching through the window as her mother's car pulled away. "Is Mom coming back?" she asked. "Yes," I said, hoping desperately it was true. "She just needs some time." "How much time?" "I don't know, sweetheart." Emma turned to look at me, and her face was older than it should be, marked by knowledge she shouldn't have yet. "Did you make a mistake, Dad?" It was the question I'd been asking myself for 36 hours. The question that had no good answer because both responses were true. Yes, I'd made mistakes. In timing, in communication, in underestimating the collateral damage. And no, I hadn't made a mistake in demanding my worth, in refusing exploitation, in choosing to be visible. "I don't know yet," I told her honestly. "Ask me in 6 months." "That's what Mom said," Emma replied quietly, "when I asked if you and her were going to be okay. She said, ask me in 6 months. 6 months. The timeline Marcus had given me. The horizon Melissa had chosen. The distance between now and some theoretical future where we'd know if any of this had been worth it." I pulled Emma into a hug and held her tight, feeling her small heart beat against my chest, and prayed that 6 months from now, we'd still be a family. That the wreckage I'd created in the name of justice wouldn't be permanent. That choosing myself didn't mean losing everyone else. But standing there in the quiet house, with my wife gone and my son angry and my daughter asking questions I couldn't answer, I wasn't sure what to believe anymore. I only knew that Monday morning, I'd walk into Meridian Strategic Group as their new Senior Vice President of Strategic Partnerships. And nothing would ever be the same again. Monday morning arrived like a verdict I couldn't appeal. I woke at 5:30 a.m. in the guest bedroom. I'd moved there Saturday night after Emma went to sleep, unable to face the emptiness of the master bedroom, where Melissa's absence screamed from every surface. The house was silent in that pre-dawn way that feels more like held breath than peace. Tyler was at his friend's house. Emma was still asleep. Melissa was still at Sarah's. Our texts reduced to logistics and monosyllables. And I was about to walk into Meridian Strategic Group as their new senior vice president, while Richard Richardson's lawyers filed motions to stop me. I'd chosen a suit carefully, one I'd bought myself 2 years ago, not the ones Melissa had picked out for family events, not the ones that carried memories of Richardson and Hale conference rooms. Navy blue, crisp white shirt, a tie that said professional without trying too hard. When I looked in the mirror, I saw someone who looked successful, put together, confident. The reflection was a damn good liar. My phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer Castellano, sent at 5:42 a.m. Hearing is Wednesday at 2 p.m. We're ready. You should go to work today as planned. Don't let Richardson's theatrics intimidate you. That's exactly what he wants. Another text, this one from Marcus. Big day, remember? You earned this. Act like it. See you at 9 for orientation. I drove to Meridian's headquarters in the gray dawn, watching the city wake around me. The building was different from Richardson and Hale, only 23 stories instead of 47, modern glass and steel instead of imposing traditional architecture. Smaller. But as I pulled into the parking garage, I noticed the cars. Teslas, Mercedes, high-end BMWs. Success, just packaged differently. The lobby was bright and open, all natural light and minimalist design. The receptionist smiled when I approached. A real smile. Warm and genuine, not the practiced corporate politeness I'd grown accustomed to. You must be James Carter. Welcome to Meridian. Marcus said to send you straight up to the 14th floor when you arrived. Executive Suite. She handed me a badge with my name already printed on it, my title underneath. Senior Vice President, Strategic Partnerships. I stared at it for a moment. This was real. I'd actually done it. The elevator was playing soft jazz instead of silence. The 14th floor opened onto an office space that felt more like a creative agency than a traditional consulting firm. Standing desks, collaboration spaces, floor-to-ceiling windows. People were already at work despite the early hour, and several looked up and waved as I passed. Friendly. Casual. No one seemed to care that I was the guy who'd just defected from their biggest competitor. Marcus's office was at the end of the hall, door open, and he stood when he saw me coming. He was younger than Richard, 52 to Richard's 67, with gray at his temples, but energy in his movements that suggested he still believed building something mattered more than protecting what you'd already built. James. He crossed the office and shook my hand with both of his, genuine warmth in his grip. Welcome. How are you feeling? Like I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop, I admitted. Marcus laughed. That's reasonable. Come on, let me show you your office before we dive into orientation. He led me down the hall to a corner office. Smaller than what I'd had at Richardson and Hale, but the view was better. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, a standing desk already set up, 2 monitors waiting to be configured. On the desk was a welcome basket with Meridian branded items and a card signed by what looked like the entire Strategic Partnerships team. I know it's been a rough few days, Marcus said, leaning against the doorframe. So I wanted to make sure you knew that you're wanted here, not just tolerated, not just hired, wanted. You bring value, James. Real value. And we're going to make sure you're compensated and recognized appropriately for it. Something in my chest loosened slightly. This was why I'd done it. This recognition. This respect. The acknowledgement that my labor had worth beyond what was convenient for the person signing my checks. Thank you, I said, and meant it. Don't thank me yet. You've got about 6 weeks of onboarding, 3 major accounts that need attention immediately, and a legal battle that's probably going to get ugly before it gets better. Marcus grinned. But hey, At least you're getting paid properly while dealing with it. The morning passed in a blur of meetings and introductions, HR paperwork, benefits enrollment, technology setup. Meeting the strategic partnerships team, 7 people, ranging from mid-20s to mid-40s, all of whom seemed genuinely excited to have me join. No one mentioned Richardson and Hale. No one asked uncomfortable questions. They treated me like a valued colleague, not a defector or a trophy. At noon, Marcus took me to lunch at a restaurant 3 blocks away. Not the kind of place with white tablecloths and hushed conversations, but a bustling Mexican place with concrete floors and loud music and food that actually tasted like something other than networking obligations. "So," Marcus said after we'd ordered, "how's it feel?" "Surreal," I admitted. "I keep waiting for someone to tell me this was all a mistake, that I don't actually belong here." Imposter syndrome. Classic. You know what helps with that? Marcus took a drink of his beer. Results. You start delivering, start seeing the impact of your work, and pretty soon you realize you're exactly where you're supposed to be. And if I don't deliver, then we'll figure it out together. But James, I didn't offer you $420,000 because I felt sorry for you. I offered it because you're worth it. Because I've watched your career for 5 years and seen what you can do. Trust that. My phone buzzed. A text from Melissa. "Tyler wants to stay at Dylan's through Wednesday. Said he needs space. Is that okay with you?" I typed back, "If that's what he needs, how are you?" The 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally. Taking it day by day. Not, "I'm good." Not, "I miss you." Not, "Come home." Just taking it day by day. Like I was a chronic illness she was learning to manage rather than her husband. "Family stuff?" Marcus asked, reading my face. "Tyler's avoiding me. Melissa's still at her friend's house. Emma's the only one who'll talk to me, and half of what she says is questions I can't answer." Marcus nodded slowly. "My wife left me 12 years ago. Different situation. I was working 80-hour weeks building this company, never home, chose ambition over marriage. But I remember those first few weeks, everything felt wrong. Like I'd made a terrible mistake and couldn't figure out how to undo it." Did it get better? Eventually. Not the way I wanted. We didn't reconcile. We divorced. But things settled into a new normal. My kids adjusted. I adjusted. Life found a different shape. He leaned forward. The question isn't whether things will be exactly like they were before. They won't. The question is whether the new shape is worth the cost of getting there. Before I could respond, Marcus's phone rang. He glanced at it, frowned, and answered. "Webb?" A pause. "When?" Another pause. "Christ. Okay. Keep me posted." He hung up and looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. That was Jennifer. Richardson's team just filed an emergency motion to freeze your bank accounts pending the outcome of the injunction hearing. Claims you've been paid by Meridian already, which you haven't yet, and that money represents stolen intellectual property. The restaurant suddenly felt very loud, very bright. The smell of grilled meat turned my stomach. "Can he do that?" I asked. "He can try. Jennifer's already filing counter motions. But James, this is what I was warning you about. Richardson isn't just fighting to keep you from working for Meridian. He's fighting to destroy you, to make you an example of what happens when people leave his orbit." I set down my fork, my appetite completely gone. "My mortgage payment is due Friday. If he freezes my accounts, Meridian will advance you whatever you need," Marcus said immediately. "We're not letting you twist in the wind here. This is on us now. All of it. The legal fees, the living expenses, everything. Consider it an interest-free loan until the courts sort this out." "Why?" The question came out more desperate than I intended. Why are you doing this for me? We barely know each other. Marcus was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. You know what I see when I look at you, James? I see someone who finally got tired of being invisible. Someone who realized that loyalty without reciprocity is just exploitation with better PR. And I see someone who's about to win, even though it doesn't feel like it right now. Win what? I've lost my wife. My kids hate me. My in-laws have disowned me. And my father-in-law is trying to bankrupt me. This doesn't feel like winning. Not yet, Marcus agreed, but it will. Because here's what Richardson doesn't understand. You can't bully people into compliance forever. Eventually, they break free. And when they do, when talented people like you realize their actual value and refuse to accept less, the whole system starts to crack. He pulled out his phone and showed me a news article from that morning. Richardson and Hale faces scrutiny after senior director's sudden departure. I scanned it quickly. Speculation about hostile work environment, mentions of allegations of systematic undercompensation, quotes from anonymous employees saying they'd been afraid to speak up. Patricia? I asked. Marcus smiled. Among others. Turns out you weren't the only one who'd been thinking about leaving. Your departure was the spark. Now other people are starting to tell their stories. I read the article again, more carefully this time. There it was, everything I'd been living through, now becoming public knowledge. Richard's pattern of exploitation. The way he used family ties and personal relationships to keep people compliant and underpaid. The culture of fear that prevented anyone from advocating for themselves. My phone rang. Jennifer Castellano. James, I need you to stay calm, she said immediately, which meant whatever she was about to tell me required the exact opposite. Richardson's team just delivered a demand letter. They're claiming you owe the company $2.4 million in liquidated damages for breach of contract. $2.4 million. I didn't have $2,400 in accessible savings, let alone millions. That's insane, I managed. It's intimidation. The contract specifies 3 times annual salary. That's $426,000, which is already probably unenforceable. They're inflating the number to scare you. Don't let it work. How am I supposed to not let it work? Jennifer, I don't have that kind of money. Even the real amount. I don't have that. You're not going to need it. We're going to eviscerate this claim. But I need you focused and present for Wednesday's hearing. Can you do that? Could I? With my marriage falling apart and my son refusing to speak to me and my father-in-law trying to destroy me financially? With Emma asking questions I couldn't answer and Melissa taking it day by day and my entire life suspended in legal limbo? Yes, I said, because what other answer was there? I can do that. After lunch, I went back to Meridian and tried to focus on onboarding, tried to learn the new systems, meet the new colleagues, understand the new processes, but my mind kept wandering to the hearing on Wednesday, to Richard's lawyers with their emergency motions and demand letters, to Melissa at Sarah's house, probably getting hourly updates from her mother about what a terrible person I was, to Tyler at his cousin's house, choosing the Richardsons over me. At 4:30, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Mr. Carter? A woman's voice, professional but warm. This is Dana Morrison from the State Labor Board. I'm calling because we've received multiple complaints about Richardson and Hale Industries regarding systematic wage suppression and hostile work environment. Your name came up several times as someone who might be willing to speak with us. I sat down slowly. Multiple complaints? 7 so far, as of this morning. All current or former employees, all telling similar stories about being underpaid relative to market rates, about being threatened when they tried to negotiate, about watching talented colleagues get pushed out when they advocated for themselves. She paused. Mr. Carter, we're opening a formal investigation. We'd like you to provide testimony, if you're willing. 7 complaints. 7 other people who'd been living through what I'd lived through. 7 people who'd found courage because I'd gone first. Yes, I said. I'll testify. Whatever you need. After she hung up, I sat in my new office looking out at the city as the late afternoon sun turned the glass towers gold. Somewhere out there, Richard Richardson was probably in his corner suite on the 47th floor, strategizing with his lawyers about how to destroy me. Somewhere out there, Melissa was probably crying or angry or both. Somewhere out there, my children were trying to make sense of a world that had fractured along lines they'd never even known existed. But somewhere out there were also 7 other people who'd found their voices, who'd stopped being invisible, who'd looked at what had happened to me and decided they wouldn't accept it anymore. Marcus appeared in my doorway. Heard about the labor board investigation? Just got the call. That's the thing about standing up, Marcus said. You don't just change your own life. You show other people what's possible. Richardson thought making an example of you would scare everyone else into compliance. He didn't count on it having the opposite effect. My phone buzzed. A text from Emma. Dad, can you come home early? I miss you. I looked at Marcus. Is it okay if I... Go, he said immediately. Family first, always. That's one thing we do differently here than Richardson did. We don't ask people to sacrifice everything else for the job. I gathered my things and headed for the elevator, feeling something I hadn't felt in days. Not quite hope, but maybe its distant cousin. The possibility that I hadn't destroyed everything. The chance that standing up had been the right choice, even if it didn't feel that way yet. The hearing was Wednesday. The investigation was opening. The story was becoming public. And somewhere in all of that chaos, maybe, just maybe, there was a path forward. I drove home through the evening traffic, the city lights beginning to glow against the darkening sky, and allowed myself to believe it. Just for a moment. Just enough to make it through one more night. If you've ever walked into a courtroom knowing that everything you've sacrificed is about to be validated or obliterated in a single ruling, you understand the particular quality of time I experienced Wednesday morning. Every second stretched elastic and strange, hours compressing into moments and moments expanding into eternities. The hearing was scheduled for 2 p.m. I'd spent Tuesday night at the dining room table with Jennifer Castellano and 2 associates, reviewing testimony, preparing for every possible question, building a defense that felt less like legal strategy and more like excavating my own life for evidence that I deserved to exist. Emma had fallen asleep on the couch around 9, her head on my shoulder, while the lawyers worked. Tyler was still at Dylan's, or perhaps still avoiding me. The distinction had started to blur, and Melissa had sent a text at midnight. I'm coming to the hearing tomorrow. Not for you. For me. I need to hear what actually happened. Now, I stood in the courthouse hallway wearing the same navy suit I'd worn Monday, watching lawyers in expensive tailoring stream past like sharks circling, and tried to remember how to breathe. Jennifer appeared from the courtroom, her expression calm but alert. They're ready for us. James, remember what we discussed? Answer only what's asked. Don't volunteer information, and don't let Richardson's lawyers provoke you into anger. That's what they want. To show you're unstable, unreliable, prone to emotional decision-making. I am prone to emotional decision-making, I said quietly. That's how I ended up here. No, Jennifer's voice was firm. You made a rational decision to stop accepting exploitation. That's not emotion, that's clarity. Don't let them reframe your dignity as dysfunction. The courtroom was smaller than I had expected. Wood paneling, fluorescent lights, an American flag in the corner that looked like it had been there since the building opened. Richard sat at the plaintiff's table with 3 lawyers, his posture perfect, his expression cold. He didn't look at me when I entered, didn't acknowledge my existence except as a problem to be solved. But Marcus Webb sat in the gallery behind our table, arms crossed, watching Richard with the intensity of a man who'd waited years for this moment. And 3 rows back, Melissa sat alone, her face pale, her hands folded in her lap. She'd come. Despite everything, she'd come. The judge entered. Judge Elizabeth Chen, mid-50s, reputation for not tolerating nonsense from either side. She reviewed the files briefly, then looked up. We're here on an emergency motion for a preliminary injunction filed by Richardson and Hale Industries against Mr. James Carter, seeking to prevent his employment with Meridian Strategic Group on grounds that it violates his non-compete agreement and poses risk of trade secret misappropriation. Mr. Hutchins, you may begin. Richard's lead attorney stood. Gerald Hutchins, same man who'd been in the termination meeting, silver-haired and practiced. Your Honor, this is a straightforward case of corporate espionage. Mr. Carter, while employed at Richardson and Hale, had access to sensitive client information, proprietary strategies, and confidential business processes. Within 24 hours of being terminated for cause— Objection, Jennifer interrupted. The termination for cause is disputed and currently under separate review by the Labor Board. Sustained, Judge Chen said. Mr. Hutchins, please confine your arguments to the non-compete and trade secret issues. Hutchins didn't miss a beat. Mr. Carter immediately signed with our primary competitor and is now positioned to leverage everything he learned at Richardson and Hale to our direct disadvantage. The non-compete clause in his contract is clear. He cannot work for a direct competitor for 24 months following departure. Judge Chen looked at Jennifer. Ms. Castellano? Jennifer stood, and there was something almost theatrical about her confidence. Your Honor, the non-compete clause is overly broad and unenforceable. Mr. Carter is being punished not for violating confidentiality, but for refusing to accept systematic underpayment. Richardson and Hale terminated him, wrongfully, we believe, and now seeks to prevent him from earning a living in the only field he's trained for. This isn't about protecting trade secrets. This is about retaliation. Strong accusation, Judge Chen said. Can you support it? We can. Jennifer opened her folder. Your Honor, I'd like to enter into evidence several items. First, Mr. Carter's performance reviews for the last 5 years, all exemplary. Second, documentation of revenue he personally generated, $83 million over 3 years. Third, his compensation history, showing that despite this performance, his salary increased only 4% total over that same period. Fourth, a recording of the termination meeting. My head snapped up. A recording? Hutchins was on his feet. Objection. We had no notice of any recording. The recording was made by building security cameras with audio, Jennifer said smoothly. It's public property, Your Honor, obtained through proper legal channels. And it directly contradicts Richardson and Hale's claim that Mr. Carter was terminated for cause. Judge Chen considered this. I'll allow it. But, Ms. Castellano, I hope you're going somewhere with this. I am, Your Honor. Jennifer pressed play on a small speaker. Richard's voice filled the courtroom, sharp and cold. As of this moment, your employment with Richardson and Hale is terminated, effective immediately. My voice calmer than I remembered being. On what grounds? Gerald's voice. Insubordination. Failure to maintain professional conduct. Threatening behavior towards senior management. My voice again. Interesting. Because terminated for cause requires gross misconduct or willful negligence, according to Section 22 of my contract. Asking for a raise doesn't meet that threshold. And then at Richard, his voice dripping with contempt. This is exactly the kind of adversarial behavior that led to your termination. Jennifer stopped the recording. Your Honor, Mr. Carter was fired for asking for a 9% raise after generating $83 million in revenue. This isn't a case about protecting confidential information. This is a case about a powerful executive punishing an employee for recognizing his own worth. The courtroom was silent. I glanced back at Melissa and saw tears streaming down her face. She'd heard her father's voice, heard the contempt, heard the confirmation that everything I'd told her was true. Hutchins recovered quickly. Your Honor, the circumstances of termination are irrelevant to the non-compete issue. I disagree, Judge Chen interrupted. She was looking at Richard now, and her expression had changed. Mr. Hutchins, your client terminated Mr. Carter, then immediately tried to prevent him from working in his field. That raises questions about the enforceability of the non-compete under constructive discharge principles. Your Honor, I'm denying the injunction, Judge Chen said flatly. The non-compete is overly broad. The termination appears pretextual, and Mr. Carter has a right to earn a living. If Richardson and Hale wants to pursue this further, they can file a full lawsuit, but they will not prevent Mr. Carter from working while they do so. She banged her gavel. We're adjourned. I sat frozen as the courtroom erupted in murmurs. Jennifer was smiling, gripping my shoulder. Marcus was already texting someone. And Richard sat perfectly still at his table, his face carved from stone, staring straight ahead like he could will away what had just happened. In the hallway afterward, Melissa found me. Her eyes were red, her makeup smeared, and when she spoke, her voice was raw. I heard him, she said. I heard how he talked to you, how he... She pressed her hands to her face. God, James, I'm so sorry. I should have believed you from the start. I should have... Mel, no. Let me finish. She lowered her hands, looked at me directly. I was so worried about keeping the family together that I didn't see what it was costing you. What it was costing all of us. My father's been manipulating people my entire life, and I've been making excuses for it because it was easier than admitting who he really is. You're not responsible for your father's behavior, I said quietly. But I am responsible for mine. For choosing his comfort over your dignity. For making you feel like you couldn't advocate for yourself without betraying us. She took a shaky breath. I'm not saying everything is fine. I'm not saying like I'm ready to come home tomorrow. But, James, I'm saying I see you now. Really see you. And I'm sorry it took a courtroom for me to get there. Before I could respond, Marcus appeared with Jennifer. James, you need to see this. He handed me his phone. A news article, posted 20 minutes ago. State Labor Board launches investigation into Richardson and Hale, following pattern of complaints. The article detailed 7 complaints, now 11, from current and former employees. It mentioned my case specifically. And it included a quote from Dana Morrison. We have credible evidence of systematic wage suppression and retaliatory practices spanning multiple years. It's not just you anymore, Marcus said. You opened the door. Now everyone's walking through. My phone buzzed. Patricia, from her personal email. I gave the labor board everything I had. 26 years of documentation. I'm testifying next week. Thank you for being brave enough, Vashav, to go first. Another email. This one from someone I didn't know, a junior analyst from Richardson and Hale. I'm leaving too. Your story gave me courage. Thank you. And another. And another. A flood of messages from people I'd never met, people whose lives I'd touched by refusing to stay invisible. 6 months later, I stood in my office at Meridian Strategic Group, watching the sun set over the city. The view never got old. Something about the angle of light, the way it turned glass towers into columns of fire, the sense of possibility in every sunset. Emma appeared in my doorway, backpack on her shoulders. It was Thursday, my custody day. We'd settled into a rhythm of shared parenting that wasn't perfect, but was working. Tyler was slowly, grudgingly talking to me again, though we had a long way to go. And Melissa was in therapy. We were in therapy. Some weeks were good, some were hard, but we were both showing up, both trying, both learning that you can't sustain a marriage on convenient fictions, but you might be able to rebuild one on difficult truths. Ready to go home, Dad? Emma asked. Our home or Mom's home? Our home, she said, and the distinction mattered. We'd kept the house. Melissa had moved back in 2 months ago, tentatively at first, then with more certainty. We were rebuilding. Slowly. Carefully. Like people learning to trust each other again after a betrayal that had gone both directions. My phone buzzed. A news alert. Richardson and Hale settles with State Labor Board for $47 million. CEO Richard Richardson steps down. I read it twice. Then showed it to Marcus, who'd appeared behind Emma. $47 million, Marcus said, reading over my shoulder. Distributed among 214 employees and former employees who were systematically underpaid. And Richard out. James, you did that. We did that, I corrected. All of us who spoke up. You went first, Marcus replied. That's what mattered. You jumped off the cliff, and everyone else realized they could fly. Later, driving Emma home through the evening traffic, she asked the question she'd been asking for 6 months. Was it worth it, Dad? All of it? I thought about the cost, the family dinners that would never be the same, the relationships that had fractured, the months of legal battles and financial stress. I thought about Tyler's anger, Melissa's tears, my own sleepless nights wondering if I'd destroyed everything for the sake of principle. But I also thought about Patricia, retired now and happy. About the 11 other employees whose complaints had turned into a labor board investigation, about the 214 people who'd received compensation for years of being undervalued. About Emma and Tyler, learning that dignity wasn't negotiable. Yes, I said. It was worth it. How do you know? I glanced at her in the rearview mirror, 9 years old, brilliant and perceptive, watching me with the intensity of someone who genuinely wanted to understand. Because I can look at myself in the mirror again, I said. Because I taught you and Tyler that standing up for yourself matters more than keeping other people comfortable. Because 214 other people got justice they wouldn't have gotten if I'd stayed quiet. But you and Mom almost got divorced. Almost, I agreed. But we didn't, because Mom learned something too, that love means supporting each other's dignity, not just maintaining peace. Emma was quiet for a moment. Then, I'm proud of you, Dad. Those 4 words, I'm proud of you, Dad, landed with more force than any court ruling, any settlement, any vindication could have managed. Because they meant I hadn't just fought for principle. I'd fought for something my children could learn from, something that would shape how they saw themselves and their worth. That night, after Emma was asleep, I found Melissa in the kitchen making tea. We'd developed new rituals in the months since I'd come back. Small routines that acknowledged we were different people now, building something new instead of trying to resurrect what had died. Did you see about your father? I asked. My mother called. Melissa's voice was calm, but I could see the complexity in her eyes. She says he's considering early retirement, going to spend time with her, travel, enjoy life, like he didn't just get forced out in disgrace. How do you feel about it? Melissa considered the question seriously. Sad, angry, relieved, all of it. She looked at me. He called me last week. First time since everything happened. Said he wanted to apologize for putting me in the middle. Did he apologize for what he did to me? No. She shook her head. He still thinks you betrayed him. Still thinks you were wrong to leave. But James, I don't care what he thinks anymore. I care what I think. And I think you were right. I think you did what you had to do. And I think I should have supported you from the start, instead of making you choose between your dignity and our family. I moved to her, wrapped my arms around her, felt her lean into the embrace. We weren't fixed. We had work to do, trust to rebuild, patterns to break. But we were trying. We were showing up. I love you, I said into her hair. I love you too, she replied. Even when it's hard. Maybe especially when it's hard. 1 year later, I stood in Marcus Webb's office looking at a framed article on his wall, the Fortune feature about Meridian's 30% growth over the previous fiscal year. There was a photo of the strategic partnerships team. I was in the center, smiling, looking like someone who belonged exactly where he was. So, Marcus said, leaning back in his chair, ready to talk about the promotion? I'd known it was coming. COO, Chief Operating Officer, Marcus's second in command. A position that would mean even more responsibility, more compensation, more visibility. The kind of role Richard Richardson had dangled as perpetually almost within reach, without ever actually offering it. I need to talk to Melissa first, I said. Make sure she's okay with the additional time commitment. Marcus smiled. See, that's the difference between you and someone like Richard. You understand that success isn't just about climbing the ladder. It's about making sure the people you love are climbing with you. I learned that the hard way, I admitted. Most important lessons are learned that way. Marcus stood, extended his hand. Take the weekend. Talk to your family. But James, you've earned this. Not because you suffered through Richard's abuse, but because you're damn good at what you do. Don't forget that. I drove home that evening with the offer in my pocket and the sunset in my windshield, thinking about the journey that had brought me here. About the man I'd been a year ago. Afraid, undervalued, invisible. About the choice I'd made in a parking garage on a cold February afternoon. About everything I'd lost and everything I'd gained. The house appeared at the end of the street, lights on in every window. Through the front window, I could see Emma practicing piano. Tyler was probably in his room, still mostly forgiving me, but not entirely. And Melissa. Melissa was in the kitchen, making dinner, building a life with me that was more honest than the one we'd had before. I pulled into the driveway and sat there for a moment, watching my family through the warm glow of our windows. This life wasn't perfect. It was complicated and sometimes difficult, and built on the ruins of what we'd lost. But it was real. It was honest. It was worth it. I got out of the car and walked toward the house, toward the family I'd almost lost and fought to keep, toward the life I'd rebuilt from the ashes of standing up. And as I opened the front door, as Emma called out, "Dad's home," and Melissa smiled from the kitchen, I knew with absolute certainty that I'd made the right choice. Not because everything had worked out perfectly, but because I'd finally learned to see myself the way I deserved to be seen. And nothing, Not Richard's threats, not family pressure, not fear or doubt or the cost of standing up could take that away from me. I was no longer invisible, and I never would be again.